Look, on behalf of RICS, I'm really happy to welcome you here today to Great George Street to celebrate International Women's Day. This is the first major event we've held here for some time, which in itself is a cause for celebration. And I'm really pleased to see so many members and friends here today. And it's particularly special that we're able to almost reopen Great George Street to celebrate International Women's Day. So welcome. Look, it's important, though, to remember that on a day on which we are celebrating this event, that there are people in Ukraine who are, frankly, suffering the most appalling brutality from an unjustified and illegal invasion of their country. My, and I'm sure all of your thoughts are with them, pretty much constantly, I expect. I just want to say that Lionheart is making itself available to support members in the region, and I would encourage all members, all of you, to read the guidance that we've published on rics.org. I would very much like to thank the members and RICS staff who've put so much work into organising today's event, and to thank all of the speakers and panellists who are here with us today. This work is a small but I think important example of how the institution must and will work as we move forward, with members and RICS staff collaborating to take the profession and the institution forward. Of course, look, we must and will celebrate International Women's Day today and in the future, and we will also recognise and celebrate other events to mark and promote the role of groups who are frankly underrepresented within the profession. But if that's all we do, the institution will fail. The institution has not done enough to promote the role of women in the profession, or the role of other groups that are frankly very underrepresented. We have to do more. The institution has to up its game to really create the equal, diverse and inclusive profession that we all want to see. So today is a small but important part of the beginning of that journey, I think. So, Ros, over to you. I'm really happy to introduce Ros Good from Avison Young, who's going to start us off today. Thanks, Ros.
So I'm hoping, where's Tim? Yes, I'm hoping you're getting some Slido instructions appearing on the screens in front of you that I can't see. There is a very strong purpose of engagement that has gone into the procurement of today. So there are going to be questions coming out to members, those in the room, welcome in person, and those that are online. So please do take a screenshot or take the picture and do whatever these phones and laptops do to get you keyed in, because it's really important to be capturing your feedback today. So thank you, Richard, for that introduction, and the elephant in the room, how much has been done by the RSS or perhaps not being done for women in the industry. So I feel very privileged. I'm hoping if Tim's going to be giving me the thumbs up, we've now got the right screen up for the intro. I feel very privileged to have been invited to introduce the morning session on International Women's Day with the theme of Break the Bias. I'd like to spend a few moments sharing my own experiences with you. I entered the profession in 1986. I know I don't look old enough. I graduated from Bristol Polytechnic and I joined a small firm in the West End called J.R. Eve. I've built my career over 36 years, girl and woman, as I often refer to it, and I rose to national head of the restructuring solutions team in my early 40s, and I was then appointed to managing director for Avison Young London in my early 50s, encompassing some 500 colleagues across the London offices. Now, if you look at me or hear me on your screens remotely and think, well, there's someone who won't have ever experienced imposter syndrome, I'll tell you that I have, and I do. It's a whole topic of its own. I'm sure one that the RICS will be picking up on, and absolutely not a monopoly for women. I count myself really lucky to have been part of a business that has always had an inclusive culture. I have been encouraged and enabled to do well. I know that is one of the key reasons that I have stayed within that business. And what did that look like? Well, I was first promoted at the age of 26. When I wanted to start a family in the early 90s, I was allowed to be flexible and work on a part-time basis. I was recognised as being ambitious and being committed, and I was promoted accordingly. And I had, unknown to me at that time, sponsors within the business who were promoting me into those senior roles. Now, I just assumed that that was the journey that I would see with my contemporaries. But sadly, I have had many friends and contacts, which I'm sure some of you in this room and online have also had, who have had very challenging experiences where the culture has been very different. And the theme that I hear as a very strong thread throughout is the inability to speak, to have a voice. Now, there is no question that we have made good progress here. You have organisations like Real Estate Balance, you have Women in Property, really important, strong voices. But when I speak on this platform, I recognise that we have an RICS membership that covers many different areas and many different sizes of business. So some of us have been very fortunate, and I count myself in that, but undoubtedly others much less so. So we have a lot of work to do. The road is long, and we must all continue individually and collectively to put energy and to support the commitment to one another. The power of three. We all hear about the power of three, because there's three things you're going to take away from this morning's sessions, no more, because that's what the psychologists tell us we can retain. I'd really like one of them to be one of my words, which is the word allyship, because we can all go away from today and engage within our businesses, particularly the smaller ones, and particularly with the more senior people in our organisations, to encourage our colleagues to be allies to their female colleagues. Ask them to be aware in meetings, to be aware in work social situations, so that they can call out the wrong behaviours. They can call out the inappropriate language that's used. I can assure you it works. I've done it, and it serves to really accelerate the conversation. So here we are at the RICS and Richard's introduction. I, like many other members, have found the last 18 months really painful. We've had huge scrutiny in the sector, and that's coming out of the Levitt report and Lord Bishard's report pending. But with challenge and change comes opportunity, and that's what we must grasp. I am so encouraged by the dedication that I am seeing from the new guard. These are really difficult roles to take on. There's a legacy here that has got to be challenged, and I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the progress that is being made in many areas through very hard work, particularly in the areas of diversity. My previous experience with the institution was words and more words. What my experience now is listening and deeds, and I haven't got a better example than that, than the pilot mentoring programme that I participated in last week, that was extremely well received by both mentors and mentees. I know we'll be hearing more about it today, and I know it's part of the roadmap that the team are wanting to set out. So this is an organisation that really wants to support our voice. Let's get involved and let's use it. And if I could ask you please to join me in applauding the team for all the hard work they've been putting in thus far. So my role is to walk you through the agenda for the day and to share some slides. We have a lot to cover. I'm going to run through a brief slide deck that will give some context on the female membership across the industry, and hopefully will start some thought-provoking conversations. I shall then be delivering up some questions on Slido, so please be ready to participate. And we're going to be picking up on the Slido responses in the closing session. So we have Nicola Forrest, RICS Matrix Chair, who will be leading the Next Gen session with Morona Tamala from Gleeds. After that, we're going to have a short break for a cup of coffee. Then Marion Ellis, SME Champion Women in Surveying, is leading session 3 to cover career progression. She will be followed by Kelly Canterford, founder of Tegro Consulting, who will support on intersectionality. And then Charlotte Neal, Director of Surveying Standards, will be delivering up the closing session. So, when I first saw this slide, I thought it was pretty good. And then I realised the dates covered 50 years. And my 1986 tells me I really was in a minority. We have lost women over time in the industry, and I can say that from my own cohort, probably more than 50% dropped away in terms of starting families. We also need to appreciate that we have 5 generations in the workplace at the moment for the first time, and this is undoubtedly reflected in these stats. Also, we acknowledge in the last 10 years there's been a real move by the industry to move to the 50-50 gender split on early years intake. But this tells us we've got a lot to do. We're behind other sectors, and here's our challenge. Wanted to share the pathways observations with you. I hope I'm not being disingenuous to rural and land and resources. I'm putting the proportionality of women in those sectors being a reflection of them being quite small in the context of the overall membership. I think what is interesting is the estate agency stats in terms of what that's telling us. Actual or perceived barriers to entry is driving women into the estate agency arena. Does it feel more diverse? Is there more passion on the housing front than the commercial sector? I think, poses interesting questions. Conversely, looking at the other end of the scale, and I'm picking up one of my young people in the audience, Fleur, who represents Building Surveyor in the lower end on the diverse agendas. And what does this tell us? Is it a perception issue? Is it interest? Is it awareness? But clearly, we've got some very distinct variants between the various elements of the profession. Coming into the global agendas, I suspect none of us are going to be surprised in terms of what these stats show, given the relative newness of the global reach in terms of RICS. So the proportions are going to be reflective of UK being strong. My last slide, I think is interesting, and I interpret as promising. UK sits in the context in the middle there, and does this perhaps tell us the value that women are attaching to professional standards in terms of other territories? I think we should be encouraged by that, because that is hopefully ensuring the raising of standards of the profession globally, and more women hopefully coming into it and encouraging others to do so. So I'm going to now come into the Slido questions for coming up on screen, which I'm hoping, Tim, is, or should I say, on your mobiles, laptops. There's 3 questions that we're keen for you to participate in. I've told Tim to allow the time for me to do it to accommodate everyone else doing it, so that we're not rushing you all. Is everyone getting those okay on... Yeah? Excellent. Happy for me to move on, Tim? Yeah? Great. So that rounds off my contribution to the morning session. I'm going to invite Nicola and Morona to come up to pick up on session 2. And please, allyship, take it away and let's make use of it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ros. My name's Nicola. I am a sustainability advisor for ISG, so I fall into that land and resources category. So it was really interesting for you to say, actually, is it because there's less people in those pathways, which I think is definitely true. I'm also the RICS Matrix chair for London, and I'm joined today by Morona, who's not only my right-hand woman in life, but she's also my vice chair. Introduce yourself.
Perfect. So thank you, Nicola. So my name is Morona Tamala. I'm a project manager at Gleeds. And as Nicola said, I am the vice chair of RICS Matrix London this year.
And I think Morona's forgot her most important title. She's our current Young Surveyor of the Year. So that deserves a round of applause. So when the RICS messaged me and Morona and said, would you be interested in holding a panel today? We were like, yes, please. And when they said, what would you like to talk about? We went, oh, we'll come back to you on that one. We did a lot of research around what was going on within our industry and across a lot of other industries, and there would be no rewards if anyone could guess what word we kept coming back to, and that was COVID-19. There's a lot of statistics and a lot of reports that have been written around young professionals post and pre-COVID, and it keeps coming back to how they have been negatively impacted by the pandemic, and that's across the board in terms of pay rises, progression, promotion, and even down to mental health. So we are being joined today by 3 young professionals within the industry to discuss actually how we can counter that regression and what we can do to break the bias for young professionals, particularly female young professions within construction and property.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, guys, for joining us on the panel. It's really great to have you, and it's great to see you all here in person. Just before we get started with the questions, we're just going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. Some of the questions that we're going to be asking the panel will also be on Slido, so do please feel free to answer them just to have a little bit of interaction. So the first panelist is Bella, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Bella Platt. I'm a project manager. I work for Gleeds, and I'm a member of RICS Matrix alongside Nicola and Morona.
Great, thanks, Bella. Selena?
Hi everyone, my name's Selena Baptiste. I'm a quantity surveyor at Garner & Theobald. I've probably been in industry now for probably about 9 years, and I've also been helping out on Matrix for the past maybe 7.
Part of the furniture.
Yeah. So yeah.
Great,
Hello.
thank you. And Richard?
Hello, yes, I'm Richard Golding. I am part of the London marketing team for Gleeds. I'm very excited to be here. I think Morona is absolutely amazing, and to have the Young Surveyor of the Year Awards title in November was really amazing to be there and witness it. So thank you for having me along.
Great, thanks, Richard.
Amazing. So just to kick the panel off, really, if you could, as a professional, young professional, how would you describe the last 2 years? I imagine we look back now with a bit of rose-tinted glasses, but professionally, how has it been for you guys?
Who wants to start?
I think it's just surreal still to look back. I think when back in 2020, I think it was March, and we first started to hear about COVID, it was surreal, you know, no one really knew what was happening. And then throughout that whole time as well, it was surreal what was happening around us. Everyone was in their own bubbles, and then this whole pandemic was unfolding, which was affecting every aspect of our lives, especially our careers for a lot of people. And then I think looking back now, it's like you said, it's rose-tinted glasses almost. It's like, did that happen? We are still coming out of it, and we're still, I think,
Evolving out of it, I think.
exactly. There's a lot of evolving from it, and we are still discovering some of the pros and the cons that have come out of COVID, and just trying to rectify that and understand the magnitude that has had still. So, yeah, I think surreal would be how I describe it.
No, yeah, definitely. I think it was at the beginning in March when we all got the news how it had come over into the UK and how we all had to go into lockdown, should we say. It was that time when you didn't feel that you could actually work from home, and how it just stopped, like the world just stopped. I remember just driving, I was moving house a month later, and just driving through London, it was like ghost town. It was actually quite scary, and feeling that, is anyone actually here? Like, everyone's at home, everyone's locked indoors, and the thought of seeing how many deaths there was, it was like watching a film. Like, you just couldn't generally believe it was happening. But yeah, it's like now we're sort of getting back to normal. It's the fact that you sort of reflect to how the past 2 years has been, especially like me personally, but it's just, it does make you reflect on your career for the future. That's how it's made me feel. Yeah.
There was a lot of unknowns, wasn't there? I mean, you sort of go into it and you're like, well, how bad is this going to be? And then suddenly toilet paper's on the brink, and it's just...
I think one of the unknowns that hasn't been spoken about for young professionals is that we necessarily weren't the decision makers within businesses. There were situations where furlough with redundancies that left a lot of us unsure, which I think that unknown is that has affected younger people more than has been considered about.
Yeah, definitely. Younger people and women, 100%. Because they would be the first ones that we put on furlough, especially if you had a young family. I mean, like, it was like, well, can you work from home with kids that aren't at school? It's like, well, yeah.
I also think people almost stopped considering their own career progression for a while and were just grateful to have a job.
Yeah.
So there was that hope. It's been 2 years of that for a lot of people, and now people are starting to reflect on how much they've developed in that time, and actually it's time to push for progression now, but for 2 years we didn't.
In terms of progression, moving into the industry, obviously, Selena, you've just passed your APC, and Bella, you're in the process of doing your APC. How did you find your entry to the profession within the RICS and sitting your APC and doing CPD during COVID? Was that?
Do you know what? It was probably, I don't know, I went a bit crazy. I think because I fell pregnant, I had a COVID baby. I call her COVID, but I love her really. I think I've got to do this now, otherwise I'll never do it. So I have to do this. And what other time where I could be at home and in the evenings and work, but it was just trying to top up on your CPD, trying to find anything and everything and just use all the information that you had. There was no other way. I just went a bit crazy and just thought, I have to do this. If I don't do this now, I don't know when am I going to do it? Or do I just leave the industry and just go?
As a young woman, did you find that the fact that things were virtual, I know the RICS put a lot of free CPD out there.
It was,
and having a child, was that beneficial for your career?
I think it was, it was, definitely. Like now we're not, obviously you reflect and think about things, but for me now, I think the best thing they did, RICS, is put it all online and actually do, because I was able to have a lot of teams with friends and old colleagues just doing my mock interviews. I was like, oh, when else would I have done this? Because you can do it at 7 o'clock at night and we're just sitting there chatting for like an hour or 2 hours. And while like dinner's cooking like next door and like they're watching Netflix or whatever. But it's like, okay, I can actually do this and I have time. And then still actually maybe do a bit of work afterwards. But I think that was a moment for everybody, like women, young professionals, to actually really put that time in. And now it just makes you think about your career. And trying to be able to progress to that next level, because like you said, like it wasn't us making those decisions, so I really had to think about my future. Okay, where am I going? Like, I need to do this if I don't do it now. But yeah, I had to.
What about you, Bella? Did you see any positives or negatives out of that for your
policy? I think having the CPD online is just a massive benefit for so many people, especially women who often have families and a lot of other things going on, and men as well, other things going on at home. Just that reduction in travel time, that accessibility is fantastic. I think some of the challenges with sitting the APC specifically was actually being able to meet some of the competencies. For example, construction technology. I couldn't get on a site barely for 2 years, and I had to somehow get like 20 hours of this in. But yeah, overall, it was manageable, but it was tough.
And Richard, from your experience, what has COVID, or how has COVID impacted your career development in the last 2 years? Do you feel it's changed at all or improved it now that we're coming out of it?
I think it's opened up a lot of opportunities. There's many more opportunities to step up, to prove your worth, to excel. But that's not to say that it's any easier. There's just more routes into it. I think you've made a very good comment on the fact that learning at your leisure means that you can sort of just build it around your lifestyle or your schedule, and you're not sort of having to sort of turn up at 9 o'clock and spend 45 minutes dealing with the district line. And yeah, so I think that's really quite good. I also agree that the free CPDs that were on offer from the RICS really helped me through my ASOC RICS qualification. And certainly at Gleeds, that transition into sort of online CPDs being recorded, even if you can't make it, you can go onto the intranet and you can download it and catch up at a later date.
That's really interesting. And actually, just picking up on the point you just mentioned before, the CPD, you know, a lot of people have mentioned the power of osmosis and, you know, knowledge transfer. And not having been in the office so much, you don't necessarily get so much of that. So, you know, how has that had a day-to-day impact on you whilst you were, you know, working from home? And, you know, also the impact of presenteeism. So, for example, before COVID, I think everybody felt the need to be in the office to really show that, you know, you are working hard and you are being efficient and you are helping without having that face-to-face contact. How did you deal with that in your role?
Well, I really enjoy being part of a team within the office, certainly from a consultancy perspective. I think there's a lot of benefit from being within earshot and running ideas past and moving fast. But that's not to say that remote working has enormous benefits. I think it's just finding the right balance between the two. And we're starting to see different attitudes towards other flexible working, childcare in office or extended maternity leave. I actually saw on LinkedIn a couple of days ago that one company is starting to trial the idea of period leave, that it's just a little bit more flexibility that can be offered to just make things a bit smoother. Have you not seen that? I think that was one of the first I've seen.
And as women in the industry, do you find that presenteeism for you guys, is that something that you are cautious of for the future? I know in the past people, like the whole thing about maternity leave, you go off for 9 months, you're not seen, who knows what happens. Is that going to be, and you know, with more people working from home, more hybrid working, is that an additional pressure on women that actually we didn't have before?
I don't know. I think, interesting question, because you always have, as a woman, when you go off from it, I mean, I've been off, I've only just gone back to work, so I've been at work the past, 2 months now. So I feel like you always have to remember you do have that gap. You're stopping, you're putting your career on hold just to be able to look after your children, which is, you know, but you don't want to miss those opportunities. So you do have to prove yourself when you go back to the office. You feel like you have to work 10 times harder. But
Are women feeling that from working from home? Do we feel like we have?
Well, I think it's helped in a way where obviously men and women are working from home. And men with young kids as well can see that pressure. I mean, I'll speak to like clients and you can hear like the kids screaming in the background. So, you know, everyone now I think it's more people understand more when you have to work from home and you have a family. Or you just have responsibilities. I mean, people have dogs that they don't want to leave. And it's like, do you know what I mean? You've got to understand that everyone has their own lives, regardless of kids or not. And we have to respect that. But I think the benefit of how COVID has helped us in a way is obviously, I mean, I would never put my screen on when it was a Teams. The thought of having a video call would freak me out. But now it's just the norm. And I'm like, why is your screen on? But I think it has changed. Our culture has changed. Our mentality has changed, regardless of like our age or if we're male or female. But I think it's just, but it's changed for the better. But there's still so much more. I mean, depending on companies, period leave, great. The those that really do suffer. But then, what about all the other companies that are still on their 6 weeks pay? Like, it's struggling. Like, I had to go back to work, but I would love to take 5 years off and sit on the beach and watch Netflix all day. But no, I enjoy going to work, to be fair, so I can't really say that. But there's still loads more to do.
Yeah, I mean, do you know or do you have any ideas of what could be done to bring out the best potential for women and young professionals in the hybrid working environment that we're moving into now?
I think it's not so much an industry thing, it's a UK-wide thing.
Across the board.
Yeah, 100%. Because, I mean, yeah, there's not many women working in the industry, but, or even like young professionals. It's just attracting young professionals.
That's the thing of what could companies do actually to promote the industries to young professionals to be seen as forward-thinking?
Yeah, it's just
So much.
such a hard question. There's so much, but obviously it's about the companies putting it forward. But I think it's about seeing how we've succeeded. I mean, there's not many people that look like me that do my job. So if I can stay in this industry and progress further, I can attract those young black females that might want to be another QS or a building surveyor, or what was the like, going to marines, or is it, I can't remember on the graph, but or minerals, whatever else. But it's just understanding that if we all we all have to work hard regardless, but we just want to show the next generation that, you know, it's a great industry to be in. And yeah, if it was easy, everyone would do it, but obviously it's hard. But
I'm going to move slightly away from career and development and move on to networking. So me and Morona obviously are the chair and vice chair of RICS Matrix for London. And, you know, we haven't had any sort of networking events for the last, I'd say, 2 years. I think the last event I came to was here. So how do you think that has impacted young professionals with growing their connections within the industry? And at what point do you think that potentially will have an impact if actually we don't have those strong connections that other professionals have had in the past?
I think this has had a huge impact on young professionals because within our industry, everyone will know your connections are a massive part of your progression of who you are and how you develop. And without these opportunities, it's really hard for young professionals to get out there and make those connections unless you're directly introduced by one of your peers or your seniors. So I think it's really important that we get back to networking, and it's really important that companies recognise, although they may have had graduates for 2 years now, they've not been out, they've not had the chance to, and managers and senior staff really need to speak with them and recognise, you know, is this something that they've maybe missed out on? What opportunities can we create to make sure that that's rectified and get them out there?
Yeah, and it's definitely the soft skills as well of actually just walking up to someone and being like, can I have a conversation with you? Which used to terrify me as a graduate. So I think there's an element of that has been missed. What about you guys? Have you got any thoughts on that?
it's interesting you say that, because I suppose I'm more thinking about I've been away because I've been on maternity leave, but actually those younger ones who've only just joined, it's like, they're probably like the same as me. So I've never really thought about it like that, but when you say that, I mean, that was the best part of the start of my career, is going out and meeting others in the industry. They may not, it might be architects or engineers, but it was just fun. I am a very sociable person, so I enjoy going out and meeting new people. So yeah, it would have, I can imagine it being really tough, but I think if we could still continue with things like the Matrix and the networking, it's just really important. Our industry's people, it's not.
Do you think traditional networking for young professionals has a place in the post-COVID world?
Yeah, definitely. I think so.
Or do you think it needs to be an evolved format?
Both, I think. Because there's still some people that are uncomfortable with networking, but actually making it more diverse, or just, like more options, like having that online quick chat, and then maybe having the social sports events, or I mean, like, I think the actual last one was the Women's International. I think that was 2 years ago.
2020, yeah.
So I mean, that was a great event, and if we could have more like that, and also like have it a bit more diverse, where others that don't feel comfortable, because there's a lot of people that aren't comfortable going out to social events. So
I think that's something COVID's really helped with, actually. People have got so inventive with how we network online now. I had a company send me a load of baking equipment, and then we did like an online baking class, and I thought, you can still keep doing things like this as well as the traditional networking. There's so many options to get out there. You don't have to leave your own home, so if you don't want to at first, you can just ease yourself into it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've obviously briefly touched on the fact that it has had a big impact on graduates and people that haven't been out there. What do you think companies actually need to do to counteract that, to rectify that issue?
I think this discussion of, especially what RICS is doing at the moment, is the mentoring. I think that's quite important now, because it's just having that guidance. And it's even just not for graduates, it's everyone really, because I think we all just need that little bit of a push or support in our careers throughout the years, because it will just help us go in that right direction. Like you were saying earlier, some people even thought about leaving the industry, and it's just having that support.
Yeah, I think,
mentally and physically, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I think management need to speak to junior staff on an individual level and understand what has happened in the last 2 years that they've missed out on. For example, I went and chaired a meeting in person for the first time in 2 years a few weeks ago, and I thought, oh my goodness, this was every day almost before COVID. And there's some graduates that have never done it in any other format than online, and there's just certain skill sets that need to be reviewed and developed, and because it's coming back now, and we need to adapt back to what we're going to be moving forwards with in the future.
I think there's a lot of catching up that needs to be done, and I really do feel for junior and graduate surveyors, because they've missed out on that water cooler moment, or overhearing a DTM and just sort of picking up bits of what's going on within the business.
You should say acronyms, the amount of meetings in now. People saying acronyms, people are like, what does that mean? Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I know within Gleeds at the moment, we're looking to increase the frequency of site visits, just to allow people to be getting on site, speaking with other people within the supply chain and the project team, just to sort of try and pick it back up. But there's a lot more that needs to be done industry-wide, for sure.
Yeah, and I think one of the big things that our industry has probably been affected with is that we are a very hands-on industry. You know, we're a practical profession. People don't get that practical skills at home. So yeah, I think that's something that is probably not valued as much as it should be within construction and property for young professionals.
Okay, so shall we move on to the next topic? So we've spoken about networking and kind of COVID generally. So moving on to career progression, and clearly, as Ros has said earlier, there has been a huge amount of progress to gender equality and better gender representation in the industry in the past 10, 20 years. Do you feel like your potential for career progression has been improved or worsened as a result of COVID and more remote working practices in the last 2 years?
I think I'm quite lucky where I am now, because there are set pathways on where I could see my future progression going. It really does depend where you are, especially as a business, because there's some businesses that don't have that.
It's interesting that you say that. I know, obviously we know each other personally, so I know that you've been to a few companies and worked at a few companies. What were some of the good things that some of them did that you would recommend others adopt?
Actually having that full career, I think it's about having a really good line manager or partner or director that knows and sees your worth. And sometimes it's not just about them recognising it, but maybe others in your business. And actually knowing what you're capable of doing and where you see yourself in the future, because there's a lot of people that can be, men and female, that can actually hold you back because they're scared of you progressing. I mean, that's another topic, I suppose. But I mean, I've been in a business where I've been told I shouldn't go as a main contractor because I'm black and I'm female. But yet I could still work with them and work for them. But yeah, anyway, that's another topic. But I think it's really just support. And it is about people, exactly what you said, because we all work with people. So we all have to work together, work with each other, but it's definitely the support. And I am very lucky where I am at Garden Field. I have a good partner and director that do support my progression and can see where I can be in the future. And it's just that for everybody, to be fair.
It's having those conversations with your line managers 100%. Where you see yourself going, where you'd like to go, and then putting the plan in place.
Yeah, and it's about being comfortable. If you're comfortable sitting with your line manager or your director and you can actually have those general conversations, then you know that you'll be able to progress and proceed in your career. It's just being comfortable, I think, and having that support.
One of the things that Ros said earlier about sort of sponsors within the business is not necessarily having a line manager, but someone that really will pull out the stops to elevate you and give you the right path that you need to do the best. And I think clearly defined career progression and frequent performance reviews are perfect for that. But working from home, you're sort of in your silo, out in the middle of nowhere, and you don't know what you're doing. I mean, you could be redlining your performance, you could be going above and beyond to imposter syndrome kicks in, and you're trying to do so much, then suddenly you're burning yourself out. And there is a big fear of, are people seeing your worth when you're remote working?
And I think that's it.
How can we change that?
I think burnout is a very interesting, I think that's a topic in itself really for young professionals. I think over the last 2 years there's been a bit of a blur between work and home and work-life balance. What do you think could be done to actually to help young professionals? What could be done to counter that for people that are just burning out? Especially when you're young and you don't necessarily have a reason to start working at 5:30.
Yeah, this is really difficult, and I think it's something that COVID magnified enormously. I definitely felt burnout throughout COVID more than I ever have done. I was working, my desk was like a metre away from my bed. I would roll out, I'd do my working day. I was studying my degree at the time, then I'd do some RICS revision, and because you didn't have that break up in the day, it was like you just didn't stop, and that was really difficult. But I think,
did you feel you were recognised for that, or was it just a case of you were doing it, and that goes back to that presenteeism question? Was it just people were just doing it, and there was actually no well done? Or
no, I think people are just doing it, and people, I think, were working increasingly longer hours, and it just almost became the norm then, which it really shouldn't be. I think in terms of tackling burnout, coming out of COVID and moving forward, I think I'd just really encourage young professionals to understand what works best for them. I think going into the office a few days really does help break things up for me. Seeing other people, having conversations, not just being at the same desk, 5 days a week, not moving. I think it can really help, and then just seeing other people and discussing that workload and how to manage it.
I found Headspace really, really good as an app, just to sort of better understand my body and my mind, and try and make sure that I'm eating the right things and getting enough sleep, and sometimes that you just need to have that sort of sounding board, and maybe that's something that's needed within the business as well.
Yeah, so maybe that's something that should be invested in more as a level for young professionals, and particularly women.
Okay, so Selina, we've touched upon a few things, I think, in this conversation now, and obviously you have worked in the industry for a few years now, appreciating you've had some time away, but have you noticed any barriers to career progression beyond managerial level, either by yourself or your peers within the companies you've worked at?
I suppose, this is a yes and no, but I'm not too sure if it's, of course it's because I'm female, but I think it's also because this industry, because what was it? I think it's maybe because there will always be barriers for women in going into a managerial position. For me personally, it's about, it's about seeing someone that, I'd love to be in your position one day. Or not so much love to be in your position, or you admire someone who's succeeded so well. I've only been in the industry for 9 years, and still I'm always learning. But I'm not really looking at being like a CEO or a managing director as such, because I enjoy what I do. But for those that are looking to be at that position, I don't think COVID has really helped or hindered it. It's just that individual and where you see yourself. I think we do have to work a lot harder to get where we want to be, or to that role. But
you mentioned kind of the people that are looking to become, managing director, CEO, things like that. In your opinion, what measure could be undertaken to promote better succession planning for those kind of positions?
For me personally, I've decided to take on a leadership course in my own personal time as Re-Rise In. So for me, I want to learn the correct way of being that leader, the right way of how I could support the next generation coming forward. So I've done my own personal research to try and progress further. And I think that's it. We just have to really invest in ourselves rather than hoping and waiting a company will do that for you, because it won't happen. unfortunately.
But leadership doesn't necessarily need to be at CEO or managing director level.
Yeah, that's true.
These skills that you're picking up in the course, you're going to be able to use that to help elevate other people within the business going forwards.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what my true goal would be, is to actually help that next generation. It's not so much, I want to run a big international billion-pound business, but it's really just knowing that, because we don't have enough QSs. We don't have enough surveyors in the industry. So it's just really trying to get that next generation. Just see how, like, going to schools or unis or
So that links really nicely onto my next question, is what can we do to inspire the next generation? Stats that Ros put up, so the massive difference between males and females in the industry. What can we do to actually inspire not even university students? I think we need to be getting in at schools and promoting what we do. What can we do? This moves away maybe from the COVID question, but what should we be doing to actually promote more women, more girls?
Yeah, it's just being more visible as an industry, because the younger generation, I'm not on TikTok, but I might be on Instagram, but I'm not. When I look at my eldest daughter, and she's 18, she's not going into surveying. But then that's her interest. Her interest is completely different. But seeing how she only knows about the industry because I work in it, but she would have no idea otherwise. And it's not even just about the kids, it's parents. Because I've been to school events and parents will go to like someone who, like the lawyer's firm or like the architects, but actually RICS, we all work together. We work with lawyers, we work with architects. Actually, we are a diverse profession that parents don't really understand what to tell their kids. So, I mean, going to schools is great, I think, just to get them to know you can do anything, be a project manager, be a building surveyor. But actually, our industry is so diverse that sometimes it's a parent's influence on the kids that stops them from thinking, oh, don't go into the profession, It's silly. But I think being more visible, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. It's like, what else is there? I can't remember.
I think this is a really important point. I did my dissertation study on how to increase awareness of job roles in the industry to young females. And I did a lot of work going into high schools and colleges to just do presentations and get some statistics on do they know what is available here? And I
think I knew what a quantity surveyor was.
No idea.
What you counting.
I can honestly say I went into about 5 different schools, and there was just one school where the girls knew any of the job role other than architect, and that was just astounding to me because there's so much out there. And then after a presentation going through the various different job roles on any given project, they had questions. They were so interested, and I thought, this is it. We don't have representation out there. We don't have enough people saying this is what's available. And I think that's just what, we all have a duty as young women and men in our profession to really make sure we're doing, and just making sure that we are advertising the opportunities available.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's about, we need to move away from the old perception of it, of, it's almost like an old man's industry, and bring it into be a bit more like we do. I think that's the role of Matrix as well, to show actually how great we are, what fun we have.
There's a lot of skills that a surveyor in 5-10 years' time are going to need that might not necessarily be in their toolkit at the moment. Programming, coding, artificial intelligence sort of is going to become more prominent.
Virtual reality, gaming.
Exactly. And the metaverse. I mean, that's another can of worms. But another perspective I'd say is around sort of modern methods of construction. Opens up to a completely different workforce that maybe someone that doesn't want to commit to a career as sort of early on. Maybe it's someone that wants to work part-time. In a controlled environment, off-site construction could be fantastic, and a great opportunity to upskill people that can help with the skill shortage.
Definitely. I'm cautious of time. I'm going to throw it out to the room. Does anyone have any questions around young professionals, women, and a post-COVID world? No questions? Oh, we've got one. Well done. Yay.
Shall I just shout?
Yeah, shout if.
Hi, my name is Adiola and I work in the comms team here at RICS. I joined just before COVID, so I didn't have an opportunity to meet the lovely people in our profession, so it's really great to be here today. I'm really struck by the lack of what was your, given you are a minority, what was it that made you join the profession, and the other women that you speak to, what is the pull, what's the draw for them?
I mean, I'm a classic example. I never thought, if you'd have said to me at 16, you're going to work in construction, I'd have been like, no, I'm not. But here I am. I fell into it by accident. And I've got one of those people, I do think everything kind of happens for a reason. And I wouldn't change it for the world now. And that's where I'm so passionate about promoting it to younger people, because actually I didn't know that it existed. But for me, I'm surrounded at work by quite a lot of inspirational women who are passionate about what they do, incredible at what they do, very successful. And that's what motivates me every day. But in terms of getting into profession, accident.
Yeah, I'll say for me, I actually joined I left uni doing media to go and be an estate agent. So it's interesting, on no stats, it's like, okay, I've done estate agency. But it was only when I was doing lettings and I was speaking with a project manager that was working on Wembley Stadium, that I was speaking to him about his career, what he'd done, and I had no idea. So that's when I started my research. So it's like, this is really a second career for me, going into the industry. I didn't know, really didn't know anything about it.
That was my experience too. So I studied languages at university to begin with, and then I got a graduate job in electrical wholesaling. And then there I was speaking with electricians, and from them I found out this whole world of construction and decided to go back to university.
I think it goes back to what Richard was saying though. We're not all bricklayers, we're not all project managers. There's so many roles within construction, you know, even behind the scenes. You go into head offices and there's VR people, there's marketing people, there's, you know, all that stuff that kids see as the cool things as well, that just isn't exposed, and said actually you can do this within the construction or the property industry. So I think it's just about getting that out there more than anything, and opening it up as a, you know, I think at school, unless you're going to be a doctor, a nurse, or like a teacher, it's not a stereotypical career path. And I think it's about breaking that bias, and actually getting in at an earlier age and exposing what's out there.
I'm Nina Robinson. I've been a member of this profession for 50 years. And I was the first woman surveyor at Charles Jones, Christopher Jones up there, in 150 years. What I'm particularly interested in, I read, and I'm sure you've read it as well, Lord Michael Bishard, in relation to the independent review on the purpose, strategy and governance and culture of the RICS. He said that many people have responded to the consultation, and particularly larger firms felt that too little emphasis had been placed on diversity and inclusion. 19% of the members are female. When I joined, we were 3% of the profession. So we have, but it's been very, very, very slow. Not enough data to have a full understanding, and not enough effort made into increased diversity, RICS staff, team, profession itself, governance structures, all working groups. And the RICS could become detached from the communities it serves. And I think this is very serious. So it's at all levels. I mean, you're very, very well describing how you're at work, but it's bringing people into the profession. And it's not just the construction profession, it's also the financial sectors as well that need to understand that we need to have equal opportunities and more diverse. And I think it's a very fundamental thing. I would suggest that we need to get at. I'd like to have your comments on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah. I think, Selena, you made a good point about this earlier, is actually having people that you can relate to. Like you said, going into a school, or, you know, bring people to say that I'm a woman, I've been successful, and people can relate to it and inspire. You know, for me, if a guy came in and said I'm a managing director in a construction industry, I'd be like, well, I can't relate to that. I can't see myself in your shoes. So I think it's about getting people out there and promoting what they can, that's what the word is, relate to.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think, first of all, it's really great to meet you. I always love to hear from women that have been in this industry for a very long time. But I think the RICS especially, I think with their new rules of conduct, are placing diversity as a much higher standard than they have done maybe previously or advertised previously. And I think that's putting an additional pressure on firms as well to review their internal procedures and then make individual members reflect on themselves and what they are doing to encourage diversity and inclusion. And I think that's really important. I think in the past year or two, especially, people are really being forced to reflect on themselves, be accountable, make their companies accountable, and the professional bodies that they're a part of really reflect on what we are doing and making sure it's at the forefront of decisions being made.
I mean, it's interesting. I'm not too sure if that survey was done before, during, or after COVID, but
During, I think.
Was it during? So I think with regards to the DI, like diversity and inclusion, I'm going to say it, I think sometimes some businesses just have it because it's a tick box.
Yeah.
So I think it's just really important that it's not.
Yeah.
I think there's an element of promoting the power of diversity and
Yeah.
the power of inclusion, because actually having such broad workforce, broad people, even within the RICS, brings in so many more ideas, innovations. It's valuable to cultures, and it shouldn't be a tick box. It should actually be appreciated for what it is.
And I think we just all need to remember, RICS is international. So it has to be. We have to have diversity and inclusion. So more work needs to be done. And sometimes we just need to not rely on the bigger businesses, but actually individuals. Because otherwise, if we don't all change as people and our mentality, then it won't change.
Yeah.
Because it's always going to be the same people at the top. And they're still all going to have the same attitudes and so it's just, there's still a lot of work.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There is, but I think people are becoming more and more confident to speak up, to say, this isn't right, we need to be doing more.
Yeah.
And that's such a big responsibility of this next generation and the generations coming after us and that are still in the industry now. We all, I think, have got much bigger platforms to discuss things that are not quite there yet and to push for that to be rectified.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because I think more younger generations that talk and speak up, the older generation will have to listen. Yeah. And that's it. That's all it's going to have to be, unfortunately.
Perfect. I'm just cautious of time.
Sorry.
Do you want to go? Or do you want... Go on, I'll let you off.
Very quick. For me, I think diversity isn't the mission, but it's the result of creating a culture that relies on fairness, inclusion, and respect. And it brings everyone together for the greater good, the common goal of evolving our profession. And I think that once we can sort of embed that into all levels of all businesses and the profession, then we'll be well and truly on track.
Perfect. I'm cautious of time. We're out of time. Just to wrap things up, thank you guys for listening. But can you all give me one word? Don't necessarily have to say why. Just one word for how you feel COVID has either positively or negatively impacted your career progression. One word. We'll leave everyone else to wonder why you chose that.
I don't know, is it one word? I'll say
Still a little bit unknown. Unknown would be mine.
I don't know. Depends what mood I'm in. It's like open opportunities, or your eyes are wide open, because there's so much more we can talk about now. But yeah, sorry, that wasn't one word.
I would say eye-opening.
Yeah,
so
okay, there you go.
Marina? What would you say? What would be your word?
I don't know one word, but actually I do think it's been a great experience.
Yeah.
Because we have gained so much, and now that we've got that kind of hindsight of having lived through COVID, that's history. People will be talking about this.
We come with a COVID generation.
Yeah.
I think it's been great.
Okay, good. Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Ready?
Thank you for coming back for part two. What an amazing panel was that just now. I have to say, as someone a bit more mature, it gives me real hope for the future when you hear the next generation talking like that, being so positive, and also slightly intimidating that we've now got to cover and do the next part. So I'm Marion Ellis, and we're going to do a bit of a different type of panel. Actually, it's going to be more of a conversation to talk about career progression from motherhood to menopause. And when we started to put this session together, what I was really mindful of is that we didn't really want to talk about women's issues, because often it comes across in a very negative sense. And really, there's a lot of positivity, I think, that we would like to share in terms of our careers. And yes, there's been highs and lows, but to put a more positive stance on it. And what I'm very, very mindful of, and having just listened to the earlier session and scribbling down bits of notes, was that actually we're looking now through a lens of 2022, and our experiences of, you know, having children and everything that we've been through in our careers, you know, is different, and it will continue to be different. So I'm just sort of mindful of some of that. So introduce my not panel, conversation panel. So for context as well, perhaps just that we've got children and where we are in our career. So I'm 47. I have been through the menopause. I have 2 children. which sounds like a bit like a confession, doesn't it? But I have survived it. And we've got Laura and Beanish. So Laura.
Yeah, so I'm Laura Collins. I work for Stanhope PLC as a development manager. I started in the industry in 2006 as an apprentice, a trainee in kind of old money. And I've got one daughter who's got special needs, so that keeps me busy. I also do lots of extracurricular stuff that I try and squeeze into my day on top of my day job. So I also run a local girl guiding unit as well, because I think it's important to kind of encourage our next generation. So.
Hi, my name is Beanish. I'm a management surveyor. So where I work, not many people know what management surveyor is, and normally I get questioned. So if you don't do home buyers or valuations, you know, what do you do then? So anyways, I'm a management surveyor. I've been in the industry since 2009 and qualified in 2017 as a member RICS. The journey has been quite complex and unusual in terms of my learning and progression. However, I've been running my own practice for past 5-6 years and it's going quite well. And I have 3 children.
And I run my own business as well. My background was as a residential valuer doing home buyers, but I did a lot of defect and valuation claims, so when it goes wrong for surveyors. And now I don't practice as a surveyor, although I call myself a surveyor still. And I coach people and help people in their businesses. And I think that's one of the things that I see when I look at other women going through their careers, is that we do, you know, sidestep. We do take different routes. It's never always just a straight path to being the CEO. But perhaps we can sort of just start, if you can remember that far back, is what did you think about, how did you think your life would pan out in terms of your career and having children? You know, did you have a set plan? Were you worried about how it might affect things? What did you feel about at the start?
So obviously, I mean, I was working before I had children and I was very career oriented, very dedicated in terms of whatever I did at times. So when I had my children, obviously the passion, the determination was still there. And it was just as we spoke previously, that it was just finding the solutions, because solutions are always out there. So the challenges that we face is we always find solutions out there. So it's just a matter of finding what we can do. Still, we can, you know, how we can achieve our goals and objectives. And obviously, it involved taking a lot of support from creating a support network, especially when I had children. But I never felt at any time that, okay, now I've got children and I have to say goodbye to my career. So it worked out quite well. I mean, I have no...
So positive that, you know...
Everything went positively. Yeah, it was possible, yeah.
What about you, Laura?
I think I agree, actually. And I think I went into motherhood very naively. And we was kind of, I think, when I had my daughter in 2016, and I think there was a huge push at that time for EDI and equality and getting more women into construction. And I think I felt quite empowered at the time that I had my daughter, and I kind of had that, well, I can do anything sort of mentality. I'm not sure it was the best mentality to have, because I think I started getting to a point where I was like, I can do everything. And it was actually just taking a step back and working out what your goals and objectives are. And I think the pandemic's probably helped a lot of people with that. But yeah, when I first started out when I was 18, that I was an M&E surveyor, so I was very specialist. I had we were three technical women out of a team of 95. So it didn't even cross my mind when I was 18 about children and how that would impact my career and the team. But I'm glad that it didn't, to be honest. I think when I had my daughter, I think I was empowered more than anything, for sure.
Yeah. When I started out, I didn't think I'd have children. And I had them later on. And that brought its own challenges, because I'd got so far and yes, I can do it. And then I realised that I perhaps can't. I guess sort of there's that element of, I guess, for me, a bit older than you, that fear of this will upset things. and that we wouldn't progress. And I did experience some of that in different ways. You talked about your network, and networks of support are absolutely vital. Where did you find people? How did that come about?
Well, I mean, I was lucky. I found a childminder. She was willing to come to my home. The one thing I did, I never sent my children anywhere. So I had always a lady coming to the house, and 8 years, I mean, obviously we had a break in between because my youngest is 3. So the middle one is 9, so we had a couple of years break, but we had same lady again, so she comes to the house. So I looked after her in many ways. It's costly, again, maintain the relationship in various ways, looking after them, so they are always with you. So that was the only thing. I mean, my husband obviously played a big part in the whole journey, and then this lady, especially looking after the children. So
I think that's something we don't always talk about, or perhaps give ourselves permission to talk about, because a network of support isn't just your girl gang, there for you, or mentoring program or whatever. Sometimes your network of support is your childminder,
exactly,
your ironing lady, your wine friends. And they come in lots of different shapes and sizes and guises, don't they? What about you?
So I had a lot of support off my parents, which I was really lucky for. And I think I actually only had 6 months off when I had my daughter. So I went back, I had her in the June and I went back in the January. So I was very kind of cautious that she was this young 6-month-old baby just about to sit up, and then mummy was going to start going to work again. But thankfully, my mum was around to help until she got to around 18 months, and then we decided to put her in a nursery. And that was more for her development more than anything else. But I think at-home networks are great, but also in-work networks are great as well. And I think the panel before was telling us about getting your sponsor and making sure that you've got that person that you can go and have a chat with and say, this isn't quite working out so well. Can we try and find a solution so that it makes both of us, the business and my personal life, a bit better, the work-life balance? I trialled many different approaches, from working from home to compressed hours to oh goodness knows what. And I was also flying out to Amsterdam at 4 o'clock in the morning, coming home at 8 o'clock at night because I didn't want to be away from her from that night and things, because I think I was in that I'm a superwoman mode.
I know this resonates.
Yeah, I think, but I'll go back to having that one person in your organisation that you can just bounce off ideas and just make sure that you're still catching up. And what I would say is I'd say every 6 months is a new phase, especially with really young children. Every 6 months something different happens. My daughter had a lot of separation anxiety, so that was a big struggle. But it's just keeping the communication open and just knowing that you're not alone. And I think something I really learned from when I become a mum was, as soon as you start going, oh, this is a bit rubbish, isn't it? And then another mum will go, yeah, I really struggle with that. But no one really talks about it because we're kind of, like I say, we're in this superhero mode that we've got to do everything on our own. And so I think opening that discussion really, really helps.
It does. But also I think, and you explained it really nicely, go into your boss's office and say, hey, this isn't working. Actually, what probably happens is you go in there a bit of a wreck because you're burnt out and you're tired and you've got yourself to this point because the support isn't always there. And I think in part it's line managers and people around you recognising the support that perhaps you might need, but also as ourselves saying, yeah, actually I do need help, and it is okay to ask for help. Because we're technical women, we can do this job, we don't need help, and we get into this real, I can do it all mode, and that's where things start to go wrong, and that's where you start to hear people leaving their work or getting to burnout you know. You talked about, and I've had some questions that some people have posed to me knowing we were talking about this. You talked about separation anxiety of your daughter being in nursery. Both my children went to nursery. I took about 9 months off with both of them. The first one, I literally ran back to work. I didn't have the network of support because we live away from our family. I didn't know what to do with this child. He was happy in nursery, and I ran back. And with my second, it was a lot harder, and she had a lot of separation anxiety too. How did you manage that? Because there's nothing worse than dropping your kid off. You know, and I mean, I have it at school when my daughter started school, and she'd been fine through nursery, but I dropped her off at school. First day, she was all happy, and then she started crying, and I'm walking away, and she says, "Mummy, don't leave me. You're breaking my heart." And you think, where did that come from? And then you have to deal with that and get on with your work. You know, how do you deal with those things?
Problem is you're the victim of your own success, right? So your children or you, so they know how to pull on your heartstrings, I think. 9 times out of 10, you'd walk out that door and they'd be absolutely fine. And I think it's having that. Having that trusted provider that you know is going to contact you if there's a problem. I think that's the biggest thing. Like it was for me, it was finding somewhere. My daughter was non-verbal until she was around 5. So it was having that place, that safe place, and I did a lot of kind of investigations on where that safe place was for my daughter, and having that ability that I know that if she's really struggling, they'll phone me and I'll come and pick her up, essentially, or someone will go and get her. And it was trial and error. She was in 3 different settings before we found like the perfect one for her. So it is, and yeah, there's lots of tears on both sides, I think.
Yeah, that's how you know, just be firm and leave them. So,
but then you've got to go into work and do a really technical job, you know, and you might be a leader of your team, you know, and it's quite. How do you leave those emotions, you know, at the door, and then start your role, your day, and that, you know, it can be really hard, you know. But I think what I've started to see a shift of, and whether it's COVID, whether it's because we're getting older and we're looking through this, you know, this 2022 lens now, is that it's much more acceptable to be human at work. It's much more acceptable, you know, to say I'm having a bad day. It's much more acceptable to say I've just got to run off and, you know, pick up the kids. And I think COVID in that sense has actually perhaps been a bit of a leveller, hasn't it? I know my husband certainly experienced that as my daughter's walked in and got up to all sorts behind his back on a Zoom. You know, but it is hard, and it is very emotional. I think also what I am seeing is parenting rather than just being a mother.
Yeah.
That actually makes such a difference, doesn't it?
I think it goes back to that allyship that we was talking about right at the start, is that there's been a huge shift over the last couple of years, and I'm just desperate that we don't go back to our old ways of kind of, right, you have to be at your desk at 8 o'clock and everything else, because we've actually, if I summarise it, we've kind of got over ourselves a little bit, and we've kind of gone, we're entitled to work-life balance, we're entitled to have a place behind the screen, behind your day-to-day job. And I think like there's some really good things that we should be celebrating. So there's a couple of, I know definitely a couple of the guys in the office that will leave early to go and pick their children up from nursery or from school. And that wouldn't have happened 3 years ago. I was also having a chat to someone, and there's some really good kind of parental leave opportunities out there that didn't even exist in 2016 when I had my daughter. So we're definitely progressing. And he was explaining to me that he gets that at that particular company they get 6 months full pay over 3 years. So they can decide as a family unit when he can take his 6 months, or he or she can take their 6 months off. And it's brilliant because for me, when I was going back to work after 6 months, if my daughter's dad was around, I may have not had so much guilt about associated with going back to work. So it is kind of getting parents back into the parenting world rather than being dependent on one person.
Binish, you work for yourself.
Yes.
And so when you've got a company with a company policy that supports parents, that's great. But when you work for yourself, it's quite different, isn't it?
It is, certainly. So my third one, I had to take her to office just 3 weeks after she was born, and I had C-section. But obviously I am needed there. So I breastfed her as well. So she stayed in office with me for 6-7 months, and then when she started, you know, she was a bit better to go on solid food, so I started to leave her at home. So in terms of, I find it flexible, but it is challenging, you know, you've just given birth to a child, and then because when you run your own businesses, majority of your clients are there because of your relationship and the service you have given to them, so they want to deal with you, they find it more comfortable. So just to make sure that nothing has been affected or nothing gets affected, just my presence in the office, even my staff feels better. So if I say I'm not coming today, they just start, oh, okay, are you coming day after tomorrow? Or so, you know, and majority of the times when we're not in the office, we are still working. I'm in holidays. 2 weeks ago I was on holidays. I was still, you know, keeping an eye on the emails and supervising work. So, but, you know, your presence makes a lot of difference and gives much more confidence to your staff. So, so it's a very different experience, but, you know, I'm happy with...
And what I find quite refreshing about that is when and we've talked about role models, and we'll come on to that, but when I hear women, you know, say, well, you know, 2 weeks after birth, I was lifting up drains and I was climbing ladders, and I think, I couldn't walk after 2 weeks, you know, and you then, it makes you feel like you're a failure because people get back to work really quickly, either physically or even for their mental health, you know, whether you could or can't. And I think the question of role models, and it was interesting seeing the poll that came up because role models was really high, as you know, as we need to see more of them. But crikey, they've got to be relatable. We've got to find something relatable about them. And sometimes, you know, for me, perhaps with my generation, I've seen too many role models that I had absolutely nothing in common with. And therefore, why would I want to be like you? And so I've had to forge my own path, and that's had its own challenges. Do either of you feel like a role model? Because you are, by the way.
Thank you. I mean, for whatever I'm doing, for instance, the model I've created for myself is to, you know, satisfy myself or make myself happy, and obviously making sure my own well-being and my family's well-being. So, but I would say that is our parents sometimes, they put in us, you know, they put the seeds in our brains and our minds that, you know, I wanted to do this and I want, so all that, you know, then we carry on for life with us. They're trying to, the vision that they had for us, trying to, you know, make that true. So, but you know, we are still better, I feel we are still better off doing what we're doing than, you know, not doing.
And I think you're right, you know, I see with my kids, you know, yes, they went into nursery and I, you know, worked full-time and I work largely part-time, is what they see is mummy with responsibilities, mummy, you know, with a work ethic and having hopefully having some boundaries over work and life. And they get to appreciate that. And I think particularly for my son, you know, get to see that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, I don't know, I've been very successful in my career, and hopefully I've been very successful being a parent as well. But I think the only role model that I'm really trying to be is for my daughter. And I know, and I think it's so difficult because there is not one size that fits all, and there's not one box that everyone should be in. And I think everyone's on their own journey, and it is a bit, the advice I got when I passed my APC back in 2011 was, this is your destiny now. You've passed your APC. you're a chartered surveyor, and now it's up to you how you shape your career. And it's a bit like that with your life as well, right? It's up to you what you want to do, and how you progress. I mean, every morning, me and my daughter are getting ready for school and work, and we have a dance off. And it's normally like a bit of an empowerment it's normally an empowering song, and it kind of sets me up for the day, to be honest.
Yeah, I have to say, if there's one big takeaway for today, it's the morning disco.
Yeah, 100%.
To get your kids out.
Yeah.
I won't name the song we have. It'll be like an earworm in your head, and you won't be able to get it out. Yeah.
But yeah, definitely.
So you've talked about, your career there. So let's talk about career progression. So did you find it stalls? How did, with the time out that you had, how did your career pan out?
Well, most of my career started going on the journey of APC after I had my children. So I was out of that phase. But when I had my third one, obviously, then it's a different challenges now. But having children and having career progression, it does slow you down. Obviously, I wouldn't say it doesn't, but because after work you're needed at home, you have got responsibilities, and then learning, most of the learning we do in our own time, so it does slow you down. So, but
in the panel this morning,
journey continues.
Yeah, I think the panel this morning, Selena, and she's still here. She talked about studying, giving birth, COVID.
Yes.
And I just think, what a rock star. To be able to do that. And when I used to recruit people, people who study while working, while having children, I don't just look at, okay, what do they qualify in? I just think, what amazing resilience, what amazing strength, what time management skills that they've obviously got to achieve that, and despite everything they did that. So I think it's quite significant when you see somebody who's worked really hard to get through to that.
Yeah, I think I describe my life as organised chaos. That's my daily routine. But I mean, my career actually accelerated once I had my daughter, and that wasn't. It's probably the age I was and where I was and what I wanted to do, and I just had this probably raging hormones when I went back to work, and I was just kind of like, well, why can't I do this? So I think when I was pregnant, I was the youngest associate they had in the business, and that was quite an achievement of itself, just because, I mean, one, I was out of male and female, I was their youngest associate, and I was pregnant on top of that. And I think the only kind of slight regret I had is that I wish that, looking back and reflecting, those 6 months I had off with her, I wish I actually really didn't worry about work, whereas I did have that kind of fear that, oh, what happens when I go back and people don't want me on projects anymore because I've had this career break? And actually it didn't matter. It really didn't matter. And I just wish I kind of enjoyed that period a little bit more, not worrying about getting back to work and getting back on track with my career.
And I think that's where employers can play a part in helping you feel more comfortable. That you're not going to lose your job, as much as we know, and that you feel supported. So so here in the UK we have keeping in touch days while you're going through your maternity leave, and most of the time they're useless. Yeah. You don't really add value to anything, but those are great opportunities to make you sort of feel reassured. And I had that exactly with my first. I was worried sick about, will I have a job? I was dealing with complaints at the time, so I was actually thinking, oh, what complaints will there be to deal with when I go back? I was off for 9 months and I was thinking about this. But also finances. And I think, whilst we're all professionals, I think there's a bit of a myth that we're all earning six-figure sums and doing really well, because actually there's a lot of surveyors who don't earn an awful lot of money. And therefore to go on maternity leave, and things are better now, again, as we look through this sort of more recent lens, but I had statutory maternity leave. I could only afford to have the time off because my husband was working. I was fortunate for that, but not everybody does. And I think it's something that a lot of women that I speak to do worry about, in terms of having money. Yeah. let's have a think. So we've talked about, you know, careers. We've talked about, you know, what it's like to have these children, and we've looked at the, you know, the panel, the next generation, and when I start to think about women, there's almost like a life cycle, isn't there? Very projecty life cycle of a female surveyor. You know, when we're starting out, how do we become surveyors? You know, our first roles, which are always quite hard to get into. Then we navigate these difficult years of, you know, are we in, are we out, have we got kids, have we not? Bearing in mind, and I think it's important to note, there are a lot of women who don't have children. You know, and some of this conversation will you know, not necessarily be relevant. What things have you done, though, I mean, do you think your career is successful? At one point, did you think your career was successful? And do you think you've got much more to go?
I mean, I think I've got much more to go. I don't know what success is. I mean, success, you know, it depends on the person. It's very subjective that how you define your success. Like we said, some people think 6-figure salary, or some
CEO.
Yeah, or CEO, or some people think, like for myself, I mean, I'm quite happy where I am. I have children. My office is 5-minute close, 5-minute distance from my house. School is there. So in my own little life, I just think I'm happy and I'm successful in where I started and where I am. In terms of the career progression, or yes, I have a few more boxes that I would like to tick. But otherwise, it's how we define or where we want to stop. So I think I'm quite satisfied and
I think it's
content.
important to take stock of that and to spend the time and actually the personal development work to understand that. Because often we worry about doing the next right thing when actually we just do the next thing. And that might mean taking a sidestep. And I see a lot of women do training roles. You know, but you know, sort of take different routes. It's just the next thing that you're doing, but really focusing on what makes you happy. And I think, particularly for surveyors, thinking about, well, why did we become a surveyor? Most surveyors that I talk to will say, well, I fell into it. And I think most of the panel this morning said exactly that. You know, I fell into it. I didn't know what it was. But there is a reason why we do this work, and I think we often need to reconnect with why that is. But what about your career? CEO?
I'm just in for the ride, right? And I think if you asked me a couple of years ago, I think I probably would have said I want to be right at the top. I want to be in there, flying around the whole world, and yeah, maybe in future. But actually, having a child with special needs, it really does make you reflect and realise what's important, and maybe that kind of career progression can actually be like this rather than just like that. And yeah, I'm just enjoying delivering great projects for a great company. I'm working with fantastic teams. We've got autonomy to kind of do what we want to do and make the industry the best that we can. And I think I'm more excited to shape and see where the industry goes rather than my own career progression now. Like I said, I'm a girl guiding leader. I'm taking 25 children on site on Saturday. I'm not sure if it's a good idea or not. But seeing their joy out of what they're going to get from that day, that does motivate me to it spurs me on really to continue.
It was interesting looking at the stats and charts that were put up this morning, you know, about where women are, and I was looking really closely because they were really small. But whilst, you know, we struggle to get women in, there's actually this drop-off. You know, the great disappeared, where have they gone? And that's something that I noticed, you know, where were my role models? You know, they didn't come back after maternity leave and all of those things. And, you know, so you have a double whammy of, yay, let's get through having kids, and oh, we've got this thing called menopause. And what I'm really grateful for is right now, I'm here in this room and I can say that word. You know, 5-10 years ago, that would absolutely not have been possible. I'd have been Who knows what would happen to me? Crazy lady. But it's much more open now, and companies are talking about having menopause policy. And I know when I started to talk about it, the more I talked about it, actually, the more men would come up to me and say, "Thank you for that, because actually my wife has got it, and I don't know what to do about it. I can't fix it." You've got to fix everything. And as I sort of go into those years, and for me, I think I had quite a gap between my two children. I think my daughter was the last egg that I popped out. And I then went straight into what I know is menopause. And that was actually a really difficult time, because I didn't understand it, either what was going on with my body, my mental health, my work environment. And two things helped. One was actually sorting out my HRT and getting that support. And secondly, actually Lionheart. And I'd really advocate, I'm an ambassador for Lionheart. They offer a lot of services for men and women, but they are themselves talking more about women. And having gone through that rocky period, and I know for some women, menopause can be worse than going through all the childbirth stuff, is that once you get through it, I'm at a place now where, I don't suffer fools gladly. I will do the work that I want to do, choose to do, and I feel much more confident almost in my own skin, but it's taken me 47 years to get here. And if I look back, could I have done anything different? I think honing in on why I do what I do, and to quote Marie Kondo, spark joy, everything I do, I've got to love doing it. There's no point wasting any time. And I remember a particularly difficult day when I came back off my maternity leave for my second child, and I was in a really foul mood, and I just thought, I'm not going to talk to anyone today. I'm just going to do the things that I like. And I noticed that my coloured computer screen was full of blue appointments everywhere, and I thought, I don't like blue, so I colour-coded it all. And then I went and bought myself some felt pens, because I like colour. And as soon as I started to do more of the stuff that I like, even though I couldn't control my job, I couldn't leave because of the mortgage and things, just focusing on the things that I liked and I enjoyed, actually then really started to shape my career and the next steps that I took. So, for me, I would just, anyone going through that, there's absolutely support out there. But also, have hope, that you can have a career and that we will be here until we're 99. And those things are possible. Any questions from the floor? It's okay if you don't. Do you want to get a microwave then?
Microwave.
Oh, they need it for the...
Laura, I'm just going to say you are an inspirational lady in terms of what you deal with. And my elder son has medical issues, and I found work an escape of compartmentalising.
Yeah.
And actually, it was a really good thing to have.
Yeah.
It sort of took you away from thinking about it all the time. But the question I'm just interested to hear from all of you is, with kids and careers come compromise, and that have-it-all observation you made, Laura, what's the compromise?
And I guess that comes back to the, can you have it all? Can you actually do the work-life balance? For me, I think it's about focusing on what's matter, what does success look like for you, and what's important. If my kids aren't happy, I'm not happy. But they also cannot be happy because I haven't given them the right sugary cereal or got sweeties or whatever. So it's having that context.
I think I've calmed down over the last few years, and I think because the whole pandemic, everyone, I was a self-confessed workaholic, and also a mum. And I think all of a sudden the brakes were put on, and although I worked throughout the whole pandemic, all of a sudden you was completely thrown into this different world. And I think if I look back when my daughter was younger, that I probably compromised a lot of my own memories. There was sometimes I didn't make it home for bedtime, and there was things that the mums were going out for the day, but I had to work, and there was a few pulls there. But I do feel, and I was working compressed hours, so I was working 5 days in 4. It was very stressful. And then on the Friday, I was pretty much in consultant rooms, kind of doing the diagnosis side with my daughter, when really that should have been a fun day. However, I think I do feel like I've got a good work-life balance at the moment. I feel like I can go to work and be me, I can go home and be me, and I feel like I've got the autonomy to do what I want to. And I kind of look at I don't look at work and I don't look at personal life separately. I actually just look at it over a 7-day period, and I pick my daughter up twice a week from school. I drop her off every day, but that might mean I might have to work a bit on a Saturday, a bit on a Sunday. But it still gives me the autonomy to go and do what I want, as well as be mum as well.
I think you're right, and I personally think we need to stop talking about work-life balance and talk about work-life integration, because it's really hard to wear different hats, and it's another thing for us to do, and to just be the mum at work, be the businesswoman with the kids in the park or at the hospital or whatever. What about you, Finish?
So same, obviously, there were occasions where we had to miss, almost I missed all their school trips. I still can't go, even I work for myself, so, or their Christmas, plays, etc. So there are many compromises actually that we all make, but again, it's the fact that you want to carry on being what you are, and at the same time you are a mum as well. So just inside you, creating those balances and sometimes consoling yourself as well. You just, there are many memories that you would sit and reminisce, and there are many things that we have missed. But
memories come from feelings.
Feelings,
as long as our children feel happy and loved, really that's one of the best things, isn't it? Yeah. Anyone else? Question? Yeah, Hannah.
Hi there. Hannah Bickersteth from Eastbourne and Lewis Council. I just wondered, because I'm a mum of 3, and I recognise in myself some of the skills that I've learned as a mother that I've been able to implement into my workplace. And I just wondered what skills you've recognised in yourselves that you have at home life that you bring into the workplace.
Great question. You go first.
One thing that came straight into my mind was tantrums. And actually how you can diffuse a situation in a meeting room. And I always say, if you can negotiate your way out of a toddler tantrum, then you can negotiate your way out of anything. And probably empathy as well, I think, and just bringing a bit of care to the workplace, and just being a bit more human, I think, and not kind of businesswoman mode, and actually open out to all of your personality.
Same, more or less similar. I mean, I understand better my staff need where they have children, or where they have situations where they have to leave work early. So it's, I've learned that people around me also have children and they also have responsibilities. So understanding their situations and respecting, and where possible, supporting them.
Yeah, I think, I'd agree with that. I think for me, actually, it's probably creativity, particularly as I started to work for myself, that whole, let's make anything out of a box. The same principles apply, and let's just create something in work. Let's just go and do something. Let's just go and have an adventure. And I think one of the big changes for me, actually, my career turning point, was I realised I do what I do. I just happen to do it in the world of surveying. And I'd always define myself as very technical, when actually you know, I'm all these things. I just happen to do it in this work and for a purpose. And that was really free. That really freed me up to get curious. And kids are great at being curious, aren't they? And building things and doing things. And that's taken me in the last certainly 4 or 5 years in all sorts of different directions. People saying, "What's she up to now?" But I just have fun with it, and I think fun actually is a big element, and we don't talk about that enough. I think it's really interesting, Hannah, though you mentioned that, because often, you know, and I think it was mentioned on the panel this morning, we talk about imposter syndrome, and there's a lot of research out. There was a paper out last year with Harvard Business Review that talked about, actually, is imposter syndrome a thing, or actually is it that our environments are not inclusive enough to make us feel that our skills as parents or whatever it might be aren't valued? And I think the more that we appreciate what it means to navigate these things that we've done through our career and to bring those extra strengths into our working lives and career, that we will thrive more and we won't feel so out of sync. And just as you were talking there, Laura, it made me think, you know, when I think about when I was a child, what my mum looked like at my age, or my granny at that age, there was a lot of curls going on and twin sets and cardies, and I don't look like that, and I ain't ever going to look like that. You know, so what the stereotype, if you like, of what a woman is at different stages is constantly moving, and I think perhaps our work environments need to rethink some of that.
Thanks very much for a really inspiring talk, and in my opinion, all three of you are fantastic role models. What I wanted to say, and I noticed what you were saying about maternity leave and how there was concern about whether you'd still have a job or whether you'd still have the opportunities when you got back. Now, I'm obviously from a much older generation and a mother of 3 and now a grandparent. And when I was on maternity leave, and it wasn't for long because I only had statutory maternity pay, I was never concerned I was going to lose my job. However, what did have a huge impact was the fact I asked to go part-time when I went back, because I personally wanted to spend half the time with my children and half the time at work. That had a colossal impact on my career progression. And actually, eventually, I changed my career. But I haven't heard any of your experiences of opportunities to go part-time and whether you can progress your career as a part-time person. And actually, I've only been full-time in the last decade of my life. I spent all of it part-time. And I'm glad I did, but the compromise was that I didn't have any career progression that I would have wanted. So I just wondered what you felt about
That's a great question. I think where we're at now, working part-time, working flexibly, there's much more of an open conversation about it. When I returned 12 years ago with my son, I did go back part-time, but that suited the company more than it did me because we were going through a crash, a recession. So that worked out. I gradually increased my hours because I was doing a full-time job in part-time. So that didn't work out. And I got to a point where my son was saying, when are you picking me up, mummy? And that whole, mum guilt and the pressure got too much. And so I decided to put him in, and his behaviour changed as well. I put him in nursery full-time, thinking if it doesn't work in 2 weeks, I'm quitting my job. Unfortunately, it did. He was happier. And so I changed. When I went to go back on maternity leave with my daughter, who had allergies, and I was breastfeeding, and I was at senior position then, more senior. I wasn't allowed to go back part-time. And my job was relocated to a different part of the country. So I was travelling the train with a breast pump in a rucksack, like a Ghostbusters backpack, and putting far too much pressure on myself. And I should have called things out, dealt with things differently, but we are where we are. I think the key to it is having a company culture that allows that. Otherwise, I think you will always be battling to try and make it work as though it's our fault, and that's not great. So it's got to come from the culture to allow that to happen. But what were your experiences?
I think things have moved on. I know partners in businesses that work part-time, and that's both male or female. And so if you can be a partner and work full-time, in theory, that should be the same for any role. Personally, my financial situation didn't allow me to work part-time because I was the main breadwinner, so I had to do the hours essentially. But I do know quite a few women in my network that do work part-time, and I should have the conversation with them really, because they don't discuss limitations, but maybe it is something we should start having a chat about.
Absolutely.
Well, I was very horrible boss to myself. I didn't allow any flexibility, so unfortunately I don't have experience on that side. So, you know, I had to work.
But I guess though, you know, now you are, and I work for myself, and I've chosen to work part-time, and I think as my children have gotten older, they need me more.
Yes.
And childcare and nursery is great when you can shove them in and just go.
Yeah.
There are advantages, but they need me more as they've gotten older, and so I've made that choice. But I've had to adapt the work that I do, the way I live my life. But I know why I'm doing it, and I'm doing it from a place of it feels like the right thing for me to do, rather than, a negative approach to it. Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
This is the last. Makes the last.
No.
Hi, Zoe Foster. I'm a valuer. It's just an observation really on the morning's panel and this panel, which I found fascinating. This morning's panel was talking a lot about COVID, obviously, and my personal experience, I actually qualified in 1999. I can see the president's name up there who gave me my certificate. A similar age to yourself. I started and was very ambitious, and then became a partner in a large practice, and then I had children. And I think a lot has been talked about, can you have a successful career? There's also an element of, do you want to have the same successful career once you've had children? And personally, I didn't want to have to be going to the client dinners after work and put in all those extra hours that was perceived at that point. My children are just starting secondary school, so this was 11 years ago. And I think things have changed a lot since then. But I think, I didn't want to put those hours in anymore. I wanted to spend time at home. So my career definitely did get negatively impacted from that point of view. And I think it's interesting from this morning's presentation as well. I mean, I've worked ad hoc over those years, but mostly been a stay-at-home mum. And then 3 weeks ago, I actually went back to work for the first time in 11 years. So I've just been up in the loft and got my work suit out, and thank God it still fits. But, I think things are so much more flexible now. Pre-COVID, I don't think there would have been opportunity for someone like me to go back into the office. And I'm working mostly from home 3 days a week. That's what my firm rang me and said, would you come back? I think there is definitely more flexibility, and the panel this morning was very impressive. And I think they should have hope that their career doesn't have to look the same as mine and yours, and people of our age. There is so much more flexibility now, I think, and so many more options to work as you want to work. And I think that's, a really positive thing that's come out of COVID. There's so much more flexibility and willingness by surveying firms and, all the small businesses to work flexibly with people, as Manish was saying, with her staff as well. So,
I think you're right, and I think it comes back down to what does success look like for us, and we all want to be validated. We worked hard to get these letters, and to be noticed. And it's interesting when you see like the panel this morning. I just want to scoop them all up and say, do you know what? It's going to be okay. And whatever you don't know, don't worry about it, because you are going to work it out, and it will not look like what we had and what our predecessors have. It will be whatever you want it to be, and now we know we do better. And I really hope that that's what we have going forward, and that's what makes it exciting, I think. So thank you very much for today. It's been really good to talk. About these things. We've got another panel coming straight on, so if you can stay seated and we'll rewire ourselves. But for me, there's lots of takeaways. Some of it will be relevant for you, some not. But I think that the key thing is, let's keep this conversation going. And to have conversations with people in your workplaces, other people, other women that you may not know. Because every time we have conversations like this, it makes a difference to somebody else and lets them know that they're not alone, and that they're not the odd one out, and that it is possible to have successful careers. And I don't think any of us thought we'd be sat up here chatting about these things a few years ago. So anything is possible. So thank you very much. Thank you.
For this part. So we're going to be talking about intersectionality in this panel. We're going to tie up all of the parts that you've heard so far, because yes, we're women in surveying, but we are much more than that. There's so many aspects. And you can see here, 4 brilliant people that are going to be speaking with you in a moment. And we're going to be talking about the biases that we face, the biases that we have ourselves, and how we can support each other to create much needed change. We're also going to consider the challenges that we face within the workplace, and how through being allies to each other, your word was so important, being allies to each other, we can elevate each other, regardless of where we grew up, how we look, what we look like, who we love, or even which bathroom we use. So in a minute, I'm going to ask these panellists to introduce themselves. But in the meantime, please do make your own assumptions about them. Because this is what we do. This is all of our biases. So while you're making those assumptions, I am going to give you a little idea about biases. And I'm going to ask you 2 questions at the same point here. So I'd like you to answer, or just think about this. How many biases do you think we have? And what is a bias? We talk about biases all the time. What is it? Well, biases, or cognitive bias, are our inherent thinking. It's our blind spot, and it reduces our thinking accuracy and can often result with some irrational conclusions, and we all see that in our day-to-day worlds. As for how many do we have? 8, 10, 30? We have over 180 biases recorded by scientists. And these things include things like your affinity bias, so our unconscious tendency to get along with people that look like us. Our confirmation bias, so we look and interpret things in the way that we want to, rather than seeing the actual things there. Availability bias, giving us that distortion to look at the information readily available so that we don't actually dig in to find the details that we really want. Often you see that in social media with the algorithms there. And also, and I think this is really important when we're looking at professional life, is the sunflower bias. And that's where we follow the leader. So everybody's attention, like the sunflower, follows the sun. Our biases will follow what the leader says and does. So if you're a leader, make sure when you're in that room just to check in with people and give the junior people or the people that are a little bit more quiet that space to speak up before you put in, because you put in, everybody will be thinking, yeah, that's a brilliant idea. I'm wholly along there with you. And biases are likely to occur when we make spontaneous judgments about situations, or all of these things happen based on our own experiences, our past experiences, whether that be our background, and if importantly, our culture. And again, our exposure to media really helps us create those biases. Now, don't get me wrong, biases have got a huge part to play in what we're doing. It's part of our evolution. How would we have escaped the lion if we didn't remember that seeing a lion meant we got to run? But to make a fair decision, we need to slow down. We need to become conscious of our actions. And so much of what we are doing in the workplace at the moment is about creating a sense of belonging, a sense of psychological safety, and bringing with that means that we need to be aware, slow down, and break those biases. So with that, let's get into the discussion. And I am going to say, if I could start with you first, Catherine, to introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Catherine Cripps. I've got 14 years experience in the property industry. I'm an asset manager and a salary partner at Knight Frank. And I'm really passionate about gender diversity and working cultures and improving, modernising cultures within the property industry.
Thank you. Will? We'll just run along the panel.
Yes.
Hand over the baton.
Exactly. Good morning. My name's Will Kirkpatrick. I'm head of hotels at Gerald Eve. About 2 years ago, I joined our Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And I must admit, I was just absolutely horrified by some of the comments that was coming out. And Gerald Eve and Knight Frank, progressive partnerships. And we were just horrified. So, as you can tell by my accent, I grew up in Northern Ireland, and during the Troubles, one of the key expressions during the peace process was, unless you are part of the solution to the problem, you're part of the problem. And that's the reason why I'm here today. So I'm very honoured to be here today to hopefully break the biases, break the change, and hopefully make things happen rather than just talk about it.
Yeah, totally. My name's Ellie, and I'm an assistant surveyor at Gerald Eve with Will. And I am really pleased to be here today to be part of the change, because I think I can offer or help to offer an opinion from a junior perspective, because I've only been in the industry for 18 months and I've already seen how unequal it is. And yeah, I think we're going to push for some progressive change just through conversations like this today.
Morning, everybody. My name's Natalie Patrick. I'm a senior building surveyor over at JLL. I was doing the maths, and it's actually 18 years since I've worked in the built environment. I've probably spent the last 15 years working in social housing and secretly always wanting to work in a multidisciplinary firm, which is what I do now. By virtue of who I am, I'm passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, and, unfortunately, to coin the phrase by Boris Johnson, to level up. And to just kind of see that equity between the genders. And it's a privilege to be at this face-to-face event at RICS HQ today.
Thank you. And we mentioned bias in that first point of looking at those biases. So perhaps, Natalie, what biases do you have biases? What biases do you see?
Well, I think I kind of did a bit of introspection, and I definitely said to myself, I don't have any biases. I tick so many boxes myself, so how could I be prejudiced against anybody else? But then I was told actually just invert that question. And so what I found when I was kind of searching myself is that I've never really felt like being the only woman was an issue for me, because from school, when you choose your options, you're the only one of 2 or 3 women in double science or treble science. It wasn't when it was at college, because I was a minority again as a woman. But I just think to myself, really, most recently, where I felt a bias against myself that perhaps I couldn't progress, or maybe building surveying or the world of surveying wasn't a place for me, was when I found out that I was ADHD, and I was like, I don't think there's a place for somebody like me in this industry. But I have taught myself, and I'm continually learning, that difference is very important. And I think when you have this kaleidoscope of this identity, what it does is it actually makes you quite empathetic and quite human, and you welcome difference. And yeah, that's kind of where I am. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well,
What do you reckon? Do you have them?
I definitely do. And I think from especially a more junior level, I think the bias I've got within myself is that, and I know this has been said before, but imposter syndrome is so real, especially when I actually have been sort of not majority, but I felt fairly equal to my peers at school, university, and then you enter this industry, which I'm fairly new into, and you do find yourself sometimes that you're the only woman in a meeting, you're the youngest in a meeting, you feel like you might not know as much, well, I definitely don't know as much as the people that I'm in the meeting with. And I think that can be a hard pill to swallow, and I think I definitely have to go into meetings making the choice to be confident. It's not just a feeling I've got to say, right, put your big girl pants on and speak up, because otherwise I feel like you don't get the same level of respect.
My goodness, I was non-cog, went into the industry at 28, and I remember being in the room going, I'm first generation university, I don't deserve, who am I to have a space in this room? Yeah. I don't belong here.
Even here, today. Yeah, thinking, why would they want to hear my opinions? But I mean, it's good to have a variety, and I'm telling myself, you push that voice away and say, actually, everyone's got a right to be here. I deserve to be here as much as anyone else does.
100%.
I hope.
I mean, Catherine, would you say that you've brought biases with you, or?
I think the first thing that springs to mind for me is I started my career in 2008, and Lehman Brothers collapsed, so just sort of a reminder of where we were at that stage. And I, much like many other people in these agency firms, was often the only woman in the team. And I learned, therefore, I read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, which, believe it or not, was over 10 years ago that was written. And I think I just learned to be, basically, by my male colleagues and counterparts, to sort of act like them, to be, to take risks, to be probably demanding, to not show emotion, to certainly never cry. And that's probably stood me in quite good stead, actually, to get me to where I am today. And I think I've sort of done well in my career as a result of those experiences, as opposed to in spite of those experiences. But I think, the world is changing, thank goodness. And, with COVID and recent events, I think we're all starting to realise and to understand the importance now of being fallible and of being human. And actually, the way to succeed in our careers and to inspire the next generation, to inspire everyone around you, current generation, is to just actually show some emotion and be yourself. And that's probably my bias, which I'm now learning and having to.
But that was it, wasn't it? For so long, to get into that space, you had to assimilate into something and hide parts of you so that you became part of that sort of the furniture, that look. So we're hiding different layers, and those different layers are the beauty of us as humans. Perhaps you can give us a bit more about the layers to identity, because you're here, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that you're not part of the women's network. Well, you are part of the women's network, but you're not women. I'm just going to let you talk.
I'm not sure what to say to that now. You're right. There is so many different layers. When I started my career, on my first job interview, I was asked, was me or members of my family connected to the IRA? Then friends of mine who were gay were commonly called wrong-uns. I'm dyslexic as well, so I was known as a bit thick and didn't go to the right public school because I went to state school. So the industry has come a long way from when I started 22 years ago. It's still got a long way to go, but actually the journey I've had is, I think, is quite easy compared to what I see other people have gone through. I've got friends who have got addiction problems and mental health issues, and the layers that they go through just humbles me, what they go through, and no one sees it. And I think, as we said earlier today, the whole point of having empathy with people and actually just taking time to listen and to understand is, and I think COVID's been good for that. But yeah, it is just humbling, isn't it, when you just hear what others, you know, we all think what we've done is difficult, but actually some people speaking today have just been so inspiring.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. It's your lens on the world. I mean, I sit here as a white cis lesbian. I have no other experience to the world. That's it. I can't tell you what this world looks like through the eyes of a white straight woman because I just don't know. And so all of our experiences are going to be different. Every person in this room will walk away with something different from today because that's who we are. What other sort of layers would you say have impacted, or are you hiding or presented to the world? Catherine, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I suppose I've got 3 sisters. I went to an all-girls grammar school. That might create some biases towards women and championing women, I would suggest. But I also had a bit of a tough time returning to work when I had my daughter. So the first time I returned from maternity leave, she's now about 5, and you know things have luckily moved on quite a bit since then. But I didn't feel like I was supported at all at the time, and that broke me. But I would say it also subsequently sort of lit my fire to really make me really passionate about this agenda. And so again, it's just little layers, and that is what's driven me in my career in a way, even more. Yeah.
As it is, we see, I mean, we had a conversation earlier about the next generation, how do we bring people in? And then the following conversation around menopause, or not menopause, just our life as women in the industry. But we peel those away. We're like onions, all of these things, and hopefully not smelling like them. I mean, I'm doing great today. I feel that I need to come to you now, Natalie.
That's all right. So I think when it comes to identity, one of the things I think is quite interesting is that identity can evolve. It was just last May that I found out I was ADHD, so that was like, oh, okay, all right. And now there's this little bit about me that I now know. But prior to that, you know, you're in the industry, you're a woman of colour, a black woman specifically, somebody who's a part of the LGBTQI community. So there are so many boxes that I've managed to tick. I don't know if there's any more that's going to happen along the way. But I think, you know, with these layers or this multifaceted identity, what it has done for me is made me very human, very empathetic, very open, and difference is normal to me. You know, I can't say that I've been in an environment where I've you know, worked with somebody and I thought to myself, well, I don't think I could relate to this person. And I think that's essentially what it does. When you have these layers of identity, it makes you relatable to a wider audience. And I think that's the currency, that's the value. I think gone are the days when I was at university and, you know, you're just thinking, right, okay, I need to be this type of person. You know, it's not a cookie cutter industry anymore, thank God. And there has to be room for difference. And that's why we're here today, I suppose.
Yeah. That's it, 100%. I mean, you look at this brilliant wall behind us, and was it 2011 when we start to see true inclusion or more diversity come within the industry. But we're still trying to expand on that and bring people in and say that it's okay, create the environment for us. I remember standing on this stage, getting my little certificate, or big certificate, and I looked around me and I just didn't see me. And I recognised that a number of people in this room would still feel that way. And it was mentioned on the panel about the next gen. If you can't see it, you can't be it. Women represent 51% of the UK. We saw earlier that the numbers are increasing in the RICS. We're now at 18%. 18%. Let's just take a moment. 50% UK? 18. So we need role models. And it's so important to find those. But also, we're sitting here, we're from consultancies, whereas we've got building, the construction industry, QS, rural, we're such a broad profession. So there are gaps in the industry as well. We've got Stephanie Hyde at JLL, who is the first CEO of a consultancy. Great, we've got one person there for us to look at from the consultancy side. Where do you see them? Where are your role models?
Well, for me, I think there are lacking in, well, females are lacking in senior positions for me to, I think for graduates, apprentices, placement students, anybody of a junior level, you're right, you want to see you or future you, because just by seeing somebody that looks similar to you, it visualizes your progression and it makes it tangible. And that's why I think, I know it was mentioned earlier, how important it is for, you know, the 50-50 recruitment. A big drive needs to be pushed for that. But I think we're struggling where we're not actually getting 50-50 female-male applicants coming through. And so it's more of a school issue too. But I definitely think that we need, and I don't know how we get them, because I just don't know if they're available, but women in senior positions, and I think it's such an attractive prospect for business too.
It's interesting, so with Changing the Face of Property, one of the organisations I work with, we try to bring people into the industry. And we are faced with teachers, community leaders that say, yeah, but these children need a profession. And you go, this is a profession. It's up there with medicine, accountancy, law. But you know what? We've got better hours. We've got a better work-life balance. But we've still got the earning potential here. And so there is much more that we need to do. And I think we saw earlier as well, people were saying, oh, I fell into the industry. I fell into the industry. And you'll see so many people say that. We need to be able to promote it much further across the school space.
I totally agree with that. And I think I but my sort of route to property was probably elongated more than it could have been. If I had known about it at school, I think I would have gone straight in there. It suits my personality. I like the people that I'm around. I mean, I only found out I did a geography degree at uni and I really enjoyed the built environment modules there. And then I took years out afterwards. But I think this could have been shortened. Definitely.
It's interesting because I left school at 16 with my dyslexia, just didn't get it. And so I'd done a BTEC that actually is slightly different. So I had a third architecture, a third town planning, and a third estate management. So I was able to go and try out for 2 years which of those three I liked. So there's an alternative way as well, which I think probably not explored enough actually. For those people who, you know, are at 16 at school, who are disillusioned, they just don't fit in that box. But yet when I got into estate management and the lights come on, if that makes sense, it all made sense, and I think that's another way as well.
So, something I think we need to almost consider more, I think a lot of firms are getting to that 50-50 graduate recruitment, have done for the last 5 years. But what we're finding is they're sort of tumbling out of our industry 5 years later. Maybe not even 2 or 3 years later, because it's before they're having children. But then they're not necessarily, well, having said that, you know, we're all here from agency firms. They're tumbling out of agency and they're going to clients. And that's because our clients have much more modern working practices and cultures. They're much more flexible in the way that they go about things. They have probably better benefits. They have a more diverse range of people as a result, and therefore they have role models. And you can therefore be more authentic in those environments. And I think that's why people are leaving. And so it's actually up to the agencies to, you know, modernise their cultures to then retain these women, because we're starting off with them, we're just not retaining them.
That's it, isn't it? The client won't accept you working less hours. They want you to be on hand all the time. But then when you actually speak to the number of clients at events like this that say, well, We only do that because you do that.
I do think I think it's a hidden problem actually in some ways because we don't talk about it enough. So it's similar to we're going through a program about 2 years ago. We've started taking certain people from our company and putting them through programs to try and help them develop through into partners and hopefully one day equity partners and so on. But if you look at the amount of people who do leave, similar to you, we're 50-50 up to associate levels. And if you look at the amount of people leave between 50-50 and to to equity partner or salary partner, it's horrifying. And this is something that needs to be done today. I mean, this is not something that people should just sit talking about. We need to do change. And unless we do change, this is going to continue. And that is, we at Gerald Eve we are a long way off getting it right. But we do need special programs. We do need to sit down and relook at our training. So we've took all our equity partners and took them out and done special training for them. And that we need to do a lot more of that. And I think, we're all having the same problem. But unless we do something about it, it's going to get worse.
Just leading off from that point, I think one of the key things is that data. I think a lot of firms don't really even know who do we have. What are the percentages? When are people dropping off? How do we prevent that hemorrhage? And I think that's in my experience, what I found. We didn't actually have a clue about the demographics. Oh, there we go. We did not have a clue about the demographics. And sometimes I think we have to go back to grassroots, speak to HR, right? Okay, who do we have? What are the age groups? Who were carers? Who were LGBTQ? Who were women or people who identify as women? And how do we retain them? And just having these really frank conversations of whether or not you see yourself within that business environment for the next 3 to 5 years. I think that's inviting those kind of conversations. And also, a lot of people are speaking about mentorship, but mentorship and sponsorship and having somebody to say, actually, this is how I feel about my progression. I thought I'd be here by now, but I'm not. What am I doing wrong? And having that kind of feedback, or just putting the feelers out to see whether or not the culture needs to change. And I do think that there's a huge piece for our respective firms to review their culture.
I think 100%. We have these questionnaires that say, will you disclose your characteristics? Mm-hmm. But many people will prefer not to say, through fear of discrimination. And that is historic, because if you said 10, 15, even 5 years ago, I have a disability, or I'm a carer, or I'm a parent, immediately that's down on your HR record, and people will look at the progression and, well, she's coming of that age, maybe we won't promote her because she might take some time off, or she might take mat leave. To get the data, we need to change the culture. And this is all so connected. And it's just embedding those views through. And again, it was said earlier with the Next Gen Committee that with that knowledge coming through from the bottom, you're seeing a lot of the senior people go, oh yeah, this is really important, because we're losing people. We are just hemorrhaging at middle management. And so that ambition that businesses have of creating a 50-50 or even 60-40 partnership demographic, it's not going to happen, because that culture is not going to keep people in. It's almost like we talk about fitting in. And I've heard of apprentices that when they've gone into the business, they've gone in as their proud selves. This is where I'm from, this is who I am. And you speak to them 3 years later, and their accents have changed a little bit. And all of a sudden they've started to go into sports events that they really don't like, but you know what, it's good because it's an opportunity to network. I can meet with those people. It's important that we try to avoid that assimilation of character. Naturally, you say you've got your different layers. How can we sort of avoid this and keep ourselves as our authentic selves in our little dysfunctional world?
I think, as I said before, the key is having a really fertile and progressive culture. Oftentimes when it comes to, say, business development, a lot of women will just be excluded because it's after work hours. So the presumption is, oh, you've got care duties or responsibilities, or you know, we're going to the races or golf and women don't play golf. And I mean, I've tried. Handicap's pretty poor, but you know, there just has to be this space for people to be who they are, and so that means we have to expand what that looks like. It is no longer, dare I borrow the phrase, male, pale and stale. We have to evolve what being a surveyor or being a part of the RICS looks like. And, you know, to me, that's key. You know, people coin that phrase to bring your whole self to work and to be in that space to say, okay, I'm from up north, or I didn't go to the right school, or I went to a state school, I didn't go to a public school. There has to be a space for everybody, because at the end of the day, really what we're looking at is your ability to bring value to the company and to do a bloody good job, really.
Yeah.
You know?
I also think that sometimes, and obviously this is coming from a junior perspective, but that space sometimes has to be created. So I think, and I think Gerald Eve are doing it at the moment, we're doing these sort of mandatory in-person D&I workshops, because I think it can be a mindset issue at the top. And I think it's so great to get everybody in the company to be involved with that and start thinking from different perspectives. But I do think maybe on the calls, you know, when you join a bit late and it's all about football, but I know this happens everywhere. I think what would be brilliant, sort of help break the bias, is to have the managers who are totally aware of this and are consciously looking out for this behaviour, just to say, how was your weekend? Not how was the match, or pulling people in. So, I think you mentioned it earlier, Kelly, saying that if somebody is a little quieter, understanding that and knowing they've got other strengths they can bring to the table, bringing them into the conversation because they might not have a stronger voice on their own. So I think, a bit of a bottom-up, top-down approach.
That's allyship, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't occupy the space, we create the space for that person's voice to be heard.
And you hope that your managers would be your allies.
100%.
You know, I think that's one of the benefits, I guess, you know, as head of department, you know, when I have these conversations, I hate football, golf bores me, so all my conversations are about what did you do at the weekend and so on, so that is there. I think just on talking about accents, as you can tell, I can speak the Queen's English. But I think, you know, Gerald Eve was always very encouraging, if that makes for me to be myself. I've got a graduate at the minute who's from Durham. One of the first things I said, you know, we were chatting through in the pub was to say, look, this is brilliant, you know, don't change, you know, be yourself, and actually that diversity is absolutely beautiful, you know, go for it. And I think that is one of the benefits as well. But yes, we need to, you're talking about entertainment, I mean, going to the days of going to, you know, football or golf, whatever, please, we can do something a bit more imaginative than that, please, that can bring everybody else in.
I think just the one thing also to remember is it sometimes feels like there's just one seat at the table, doesn't it? And it does still feel a little bit like that. And that we've got to remember that we're not there because we're lucky. We're there because we've worked really hard. We've worked really, really hard to get there, essentially. And we're deserved of that seat at that table, if you are at that table.
My goodness, that phrase. I'm so lucky to have got to my position, like brilliant. So if I don't get the luck, I can't be a senior person. Right, but that's it, to get that recognition. You're all working really hard, you're all studying, you've got to that point, you're respected. That's why you're in the role you're in. And that was it. For many years, we had people from minority groups being hired as a kind of, well, you're a token. And that thing that, and we've seen this for many years, that women who are in those senior positions tended to have sharp elbows, because there was only space for one person, and pulling the ladder up rather than pulling people up. So how is it that we can create that workplace that will really pull people up so we can take the space that we deserve?
I think it's pipeline, really, and just not being afraid of. You have to have a space for women to feel comfortable and to not feel that, as a woman, maybe as the only woman in the department, that, okay, this is like my only chance, I can't mess up, you know, I have to be perfect, I have to be available all the time. Sometimes I think it feels very do or die, and when you feel that you're in that kind of do or die headspace, you then begin to conserve your space and maybe push other women, dare I say, to the side, because like I've had to carve out this space for me, and it's for me. But I think we have to understand, as women to women, that we also have a responsibility to ourselves and to each other. I mean, I can give a couple of examples of where I've had some harrowing experiences, not at the hand of, a cis middle-class white man, but it's definitely been at the hands of a woman. And you think, well, why have you been that way? And it's this mindset that she's had to fight so hard to get to her place, and nothing and no one's gonna take that crown or that spot for her. Essentially, when we're breaking the bias, we're saying, I'm accountable as a woman, and when I see another woman come into the office, I also have to be her ally by virtue of the fact that I'm a woman, and I want to see another woman sit next to me or come after me. It's legacy, and I think we need to think ahead. It's not about us. When we sign up to the RICS, we have a duty to, I suppose, preach the RICS gospel and make sure that there are other women behind us. So, yeah, we have to check our privilege, I think, really, and understand we have a responsibility as other women to bring other women with us.
I think that's at the very least one. I think sometimes you're right with the sharp elbows situation where a woman has, worked so hard to get where she is. I think celebrating women's success is what we should all be doing. I think if one of your colleagues who's a female has done something brilliant, shout about it, post on your intranet, post on LinkedIn. It's the little things that I think go a long way. And equally, if you are somebody who may get a pang of jealousy or a pang of resentment, I think you need to sit with that feeling and check yourself and consciously try and change that, I think.
So a big concern for me is burnout. We were speaking recently to one of her female partners, and she was just saying that what she'd done to get to partner was, her life, her social life was basically put aside. She was determined to get to partner by a certain age so that she could have children, and therefore once she had children, she knew she could, continue. And that absolutely horrified me. I mean, just listen to she's a very strong lady, so she didn't burn herself out, but my God, she was close to it, and that is a real concern.
I know we're getting very close to wrapping up, so is there any questions from the room before we go into our last moment? Anyone? I mean, we've answered it all, haven't we? But what I will ask everyone is, what would you like to leave our audience with? Anybody want to jump in?
I've got a big mouth. I think there's three things. In my viewpoint is one, is we need to look at this issue from associate partner levels and what's happening at that. To me, today, that is the biggest thing we need to look at, and we need to face it, tackle it, and it needs to be done now. Secondly, as we discussed earlier, obviously about getting more females into the surveying system. I think the latest stats is 38% of graduates coming through are females, so we've still got a long way to go. And then thirdly is we need to start training existing companies and staff and members in terms of how to be support, to be allies. And it's not, because some men say, well, they're getting an unfair disadvantage. And I say, well, if you had such a large segmentation of your company leaving, you'd do something about it. You just wouldn't sit there and do nothing. And that's where we are today. So we have to do something about it. And that's kind of 3 points I have. Apologies.
I think my takeaway probably, hopefully, slightly answers your first one, which is we still have tragically traditional working cultures within property, especially within our agencies that are all seeing women leave. And I think the companies that modernise those cultures and work it out and allow people to work flexibly, allow people to be themselves, they'll be the winners, essentially. Get there first.
Mine goes back to what I just said. I think celebrating women's or anybody else's success does not detract from your own, and achievement should be shouted about.
Absolutely. I think can just add that checking your privilege is really important. It doesn't matter where you are in the company. I think we can all assist in breaking the bias and just hold senior partners and senior leadership board to account. That change is necessary and it hits the bottom line.
Okay, I'm going to use my chair privilege and add to that and say, well, look, we're all part of several groups. We're defined by our race, gender, religion, family. And if we go out of our way to help one of our in-group members, we don't see that as a bad thing. We see it as like, we're being good people. But that privileging reinforces the status quo. The rich get richer and the rest fall behind. So while we may not have much power to eradicate our prejudices, we are possible about counteracting them. And the first step is to turn our hidden biases into a visible one, because if it's visible, we can change it. And the other point is, you know, that woman that you're looking up to, that role model, that person that she's got it all, she's got the answers, she's calm, you know, the one that you're looking up to in the workplace, she's kind of got the family, she hasn't got the family. That's you. Because every woman will look at another woman and think, God, how does she do that? How is she managing it all? I haven't got time, I'm not doing my emails. Somebody's looking at you to do that. So keep being the brilliant role model you are and help us create the change.
Is that working? Okay. It's not mirroring on here, so I can't actually see what it's showing. Oh. Come on, Tim. He said to me, it's fine, just get up there and press the arrows, it'll all work. Up and down.
Down.
Down. Got you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us. We are running a little bit over time, but we felt that the content of the sessions was really important and we didn't want to cut people off. So I appreciate you staying with us. I'll try and be relatively brief, but pick up quite a lot of the points that have come across today. So my name is Charlotte Neal. I'm Director of Surveying Standards here at the RICS. I'm a chartered surveyor. I'm a single mum. And like others have said, I really lacked support when I came back to work after taking maternity leave. I was going to say I've been very fortunate in my career, but actually, as everyone else has been saying, I've worked really, really hard to get where I am, and it has been tough. And as I think it was Laura was saying, there have been ups and downs. There were times when I knew I was flying and times when I felt like I was flying up the curve to be washed right back down as soon as I put all that hard effort in. And what I'm going to cover today, I'm going to use a lot of my own experiences. So they won't be relevant to everyone, but hopefully something from everything that I say will resonate with all of you. I've been a surveyor now for over 20 years, and I've worked for some really fantastic companies. And all of the companies I've worked for have had some pros and cons around how they support women and how they support diversity. And I've worked for some really big consultancy firms, and it's been really interesting, and my career has been brilliant from that point of view. And it's been very interesting for us to speak to the young women in the profession and understand how things have changed, because I can bet your bottom dollar the experience I had over 20 years ago is nothing like the experience now. And that's why here at the RICS we need to really pick this up and start evolving as our careers are evolving as well. So we went out and we asked young women in the profession what they thought. We're a great bunch of people. Well, that's great to know. We're sociable. We've got really interesting jobs. We've got really diverse jobs, both in terms of the roles that we can have, but also in terms of our working day. It's a fast-paced industry. It's stimulating and it's intellectually challenging. And work life can either be a positive or a negative, depending on where you are in your career and what aspects of challenge that you are facing at that time. Personally, I love being a surveyor. I love being able to get outside, and I love being able to chat to people and understand about their experiences and their worlds and their industries. But it's not all good, and we know that, and we've been out and we've listened, and I've experienced as well. Imposter syndrome, it's come up in every single session. It's real, it's there, and we feel it. There's a lack of diversity. I started in minerals, which I know we all had a bit of a laugh about on the Next Gen. 6% now, I can tell you it wasn't 6% then. I didn't even know what I was doing at my first job. I got this letter through, you've been accepted. I thought, this is brilliant, I've got a job in the minerals department. What is that? I was a general practice surveyor. I just didn't even understand what I was doing until someone said to me, don't worry, Charlotte, you're going to be looking for emeralds and rubies. And then I was happy and I was like, great, this is fine. That was not what I was doing. And I was laughed at every single day. There was no other man on site. I was the butt of the jokes just for turning up to work. And also I was the bag carrier. And it wasn't great, albeit my boss actually was very nice. There's a lack of role models, and we've heard a lot about people dropping out in their careers. But I think it's also important to remember we don't just need female role models, we need male role models as well. And because there have been a lack of senior women, actually most of my role models have been men, and they've had some really good things to do and say. And so it's about finding anyone in the industry who is going to support you and help you progress your career. Just to give a bit of a flavour, I was at university a long time ago, and I was the only girl who graduated on my course of 90 men. It started with 5 women the year that I started in the first year. I was the only one with a brother, and I had quite a lot of male cousins. And I was the only girl who went on to year 2. And it wasn't because the other girls couldn't do it, but I think that I had learnt how to deal with, dare I say it, offensive and discriminatory remarks just because they were around. But also I think it was the way in which I chose to perceive them as a joke. And that's how I got through. And that was fine, and it worked for me, but it doesn't really work these days, and it's not really acceptable these days. So the world is changing. I think also, I remember going to a women's network event. I was terribly excited, going to meet all these other powerful women in the industry. They were going to be my role models. And the lady that introduced it, she was fantastic. She is fantastic, and she's still in the industry, and she 100% is a role model. However, they decided in their wisdom to have some external speakers to come and talk to us. They were all American. They were all supported massively by their husbands. I was a single girl at that time. Supported massively by their husbands. And apparently, they all used to get up at 5 a.m, look in the mirror and say, I can do this, whilst drinking either hot water and lemon or a large glass of water to hydrate themselves for the day. And this just did not resonate with me. 5 a.m. was something where I was going home to bed, not arriving to get up for my day. So I think it is difficult and it is a challenge, and we are hearing all of these points. We understand, and we're really determined to make a change. I've had some great pals as well, some of whom are in this room, and they've been with me throughout my career. And I have been one of the only women in my peer group. And those guys have supported me, taken me along to things. But there were challenges. Do I go to the strip club at midnight when everyone else goes? And actually, on occasion, I have, because I felt under pressure that if I didn't go, I wasn't going to be part of that group. Now, as a senior person, I'd definitely be in the cab on my way home. But, you know, these are the pressures that we face that I just think go unsaid, because I'm pretty sure if I'd raised it with my senior leaders, they would have had quite a lot to say about it. I just don't think they knew that this sort of thing was going on and the pressure that you felt to do that. But for all the negative things, you can probably tell by the way I speak, I actually really love surveying, and I love being a female surveyor. And we really need the industry to support all of you females out there, and anyone from a diverse background as well, whatever that means in terms of whether it's social or gender or sexuality. And here at the RICS, we're really determined that we're going to make those changes, and we're going to help support you and guide you through your careers. So we've looked at some of the data, and, you know, Nina, you said that you'd been in the industry, I think, for 50 years. Well, when I started, which was just over 20 years ago, if I was lucky enough to get in the boardroom, all I could see was predominantly white, middle-class males. But it's changing. And now I'm fortunate enough to have a seat at the table, and there are far more women, consciously and because they deserve that seat at the table. I could count on one hand the good female leaders when I first came through in the surveying industry. There's a legacy issue there, not just about why women leave the industry, but about the women that have come up just through things like qualifications, going to university and being the only girl on the course. And I think it's also a change in those type of leaders as well. Back when I was much younger and a graduate, a lot of the female leaders, I think, felt they had to behave in a way that they thought was male. So they weren't authentic to themselves, nor the other women in the room or in the industry or their firms. And I call them shouty women, those ladies that always shouted their point. And fortunately, I don't think we have to be like that anymore, and certainly I rarely see that anymore. Natalie, you said we need better data. You are absolutely right. This slide tells us that young students coming through have greater diversity. 26% are women, 26% are from ethnic minorities. But of those 26% women, how many of those are from ethnic minorities, etc., or diverse cultural backgrounds, social levels? And we just don't have that data, and we need to start capturing it, and we're doing a lot to try and do that. But we need everyone's help to do that. We need you to share your data around your firms, etc., and we need you to be open and flexible about what you're experiencing, so that we can help shape the future of the industry and react to that. We need to drive positive perceptions. We've talked about this all morning through the life cycle. I mean, we went out and we did a graduate career survey about surveying. The negatives: there was a lack of training and development, a lack of status. It was high-stressed career, low salaries, and there was high career risk in uncertain times. The positives: work-life balance, the people that you work with, the type of degree that you have is less important. Intellectually, it's a demanding job. It challenges people, it interests people. These are really, really great things to know. And what we now need to do is look at industries such as engineering, where they've gone out and they've targeted STEM and they've changed perceptions, and it's really worked for them. And we need to do that for us as surveyors. But we need to start right at the bottom with children. I have small kids. My 5-year-old, I mean, if I could bleat on more about surveying, I just don't think it's possible. But he thinks I work in a crane, so, you know, it's not necessarily how it should be. But also, if I go to one more careers fair where a theodolite is wheeled out, and that's what surveying is. You know, it's great if that's your field, but there are so many different areas of surveying. And today I'm actually asking all of you to go out there and spread the word. Help us share our positive experiences about surveying in the industry. Whether that's turning up on your, I know a lot of firms do volunteering days, whether you go to your local school, your children's school, your friend's school, your brother's children's school, whatever it is, go and share your experience and speak to these young people and tell them about our industry and all the good things and the changes that are taking place and going to happen over their school life, so that when they're making choices about their careers and going to university or whatever route they choose to come into surveying, they have it on their horizon. We need to champion senior level female surveyors leading the profession. I mean, it goes without saying, it's just obvious. We need great role models, and I know some fabulous women out there, some of whom are in this room, and I'm looking at one of them now, but she's not looking at me, who is a great role model for me when I was coming up through the ranks. We need to encourage ladies back into the workforce post-career break, whatever that break was for, whether it was to have children or just that they wanted to go and travel or do something different. But we've got to work out how to do that, and we need support from all of you in this room and watching, and from the firms to do that. And we need to really harness the fact that diversity drives great ideas, makes workplaces far more engaging and exciting to work in. And we need more equality around things such as family life. So if you've got a family, it shouldn't be about maternity leave. It should include paternity leave. And the options for the men need to be the same as the women, so that you're not actually creating a difference between us. It was great to hear about the Next Gen in session talking about during COVID, and how actually that did help to level up some of the family choices that were being made. We need to remember, it's not just, though, about people going off and having children. We need to support people who can't have children or who want to go and have infertility treatment. We need to help those who are mums, like me, single, well, any mum, but I'm a single mum, so childcare is really quite important to me. I remember being told when I went off on mat leave that if I was really doing well, and I was told, when you come back, Charlotte, get a nanny. That's how you're going to get promoted, which, you know, is just not an acceptable answer. And also, until you're promoted, you can't really afford that nanny anyway. So, you know, how do you do that? And there are those that choose not to have families for whatever reason and put their career first, but are fed up of pushing against that glass ceiling all the time, or the people that go out and care for their parents. Often, not always, often women are the ones that go and care for their elderly parents. We need to work out a way that allows them to have a good career but meet the obligations that they feel they need to meet. And so it's really important that we gather this information and we gather this data, and we use that to support our senior leaders and our senior female leaders, so that they can be the role models that we've all talked about today that we need. So this is a really interesting statistic that we have, and this is around our RICS membership. The average RICS male membership is 28 years versus female membership being 16 years. Well, it goes to say, if you've got less women and they're leaving quicker, you're going to have a lack of senior women often. We need to understand the barriers. We need you to help us with that. We need some honest, frank conversations. And we really need to understand how to encourage females to stay, to change this statistic. So, areas of focus for the future. There's no point in us talking about where we are if we don't look forward and work out how we're going to find a solution. I think it was Will made the really good comment, you know, there's no point in being here discussing it. You need a solution and you need to work together to do that. I mean, just going through some of these points that you can see on the slide, continued focus on increasing diversity. I've had friends in the surveying profession who were afraid to say they were gay, who were afraid to say they had fertility issues, and when offered jobs didn't take the position because they didn't want to have to say they were going for treatment. I've got friends, myself included, who haven't mentioned their children in their interview because they think it will be held against them. And I've got friends who are single and don't say that they're single because they don't want to be considered aggressive or what's wrong with them, that they're not going out with someone. And this is, you know, there are lots of different reasons that we're all having these challenges, and we need to recognise all of them. And by understanding and addressing the barriers to entry, you know, we can start levelling up the field that we're working in. But we need our leaders and our firms to recognise that and help with the rhetoric that they're having around these issues. I've recently had a young female join our team, and I know she has a young child. And one of my opening statements in her induction meeting with me was to say to her, I appreciate you've got a small child. It doesn't always work. Don't feel that you can't tell me that you're having an issue with your childcare. All I ask is that you tell me so I can make sure that we've covered off the resource that we need for the day or whatever it is that we're doing. We need firms to help us and really get on board, but in the right way. It's not just about talking, it's about supporting. And the different ways of working also. I mean, flexible working, well, brilliant. I went on to flexible working 7 years ago when I had my daughter, and it was regarded as my day off by my colleagues. And I often had comments about it. But equally, I have friends who don't have children, and they always feel that they have to pick up the slack for people such as myself who aren't in the office, and we need to appreciate that as well. We need to have childcare in place as a backup, so that if we do have people who have problems, there's a resource that they can pull from so that they can be in the office, maybe not within the next hour, but within a couple of hours, and carry on with their day without feeling that they have been excluded because they've got to deal with an issue. Menopause. Well, it's a fact that women start losing some of their strength. We've got some brilliant building surveyors and people in construction here in this room and all across the surveying industry. We need to work out how that's going to impact upon them and how we support them to carry on doing their jobs. We need to understand the fact that you forget things. I write everything down. We also need to remember it's not just menopause. There's perimenopause that leads up in the 10 years, I think it is, horrifying stat, up to when you actually then hit menopause, God forbid us. Lone workers, issues around well-being, mental health, safeguarding. I remember doing an inspection of a building in Burnley, I think it was, and I was up on one of the top floors. There were no lights, there were no windows, the building was derelict, it was boarded up. I worked out that there was at least a foot gap between the external wall and the floor plate. I could hear voices. There were people in that room and I was petrified. But not only that, it was above a supermarket, and the supermarket manager, in his wisdom, had locked me in to stop someone following me up the stairs, but it meant I couldn't get out. My best friend bought me the biggest mag light she could, and I still carry it today. But, you know, we shouldn't have that problem, but there are apps to help, and we need to use them, and we need to be open about it so that people don't feel it's something they should be hiding. And we need better harassment policies and the way in which they are approached and people's mindset to investigating these things. But there's something else that I think we need, and I think it's much easier when you're older, and that is confidence in our abilities. We need to be able to feel that we do a great job and therefore we don't have to justify our actions. It was a bit of a revelation to me when I first had my daughter, and that I went into a meeting with a senior male leader, and we had a really, really big meeting. It was huge. It was a massive, massive deal. And he sat there, and there were about 15 people that needed to get in the room to get the deal signed. And he said, I can't make it. And he was the only person that couldn't make it. And everyone sat and looked at him, and he said, it's my child's nativity. And we worked out how we could make it work. But it was a bit of a revelation to me, because I have to be honest, I sat there going, you've got to be kidding me, you can't miss this deal because of that. And then I realised that actually the really important thing is he was making the day for his child that he had promised. And whether it's your child, your partner, your friends, your family, you know, we've got to remember it's important. What's the most important thing for you, and making sure that you feel you can carry out your job, but keep honest to yourself. So current initiatives underway. I was very privileged last week to be part of the Women's Next Generation Speed Mentoring Scheme. It was really interesting to speak to these young women from across the industry, to hear what they had to say. And I'm delighted to say that one girl actually said to me, I don't actually have a problem. I don't have an issue. I'm not really sure whether I'm taking someone else's place. And she felt guilty to be sitting there saying, actually, I'm not really having a problem. My job's going really well. We need more people like that, because we need those people to talk about, actually, it's not all bad. This is a great industry. I'm enjoying my job. This is good. To remind those that are struggling what it was like before, or what it will be like going forwards if they get the right support. I think we need more around mid-career. We've talked about menopause. I know we're planning a menopause session that Emma's going to be leading for us. And we need to have roundtables where we can talk to all of you, men and women, about the experiences and how they perceive things, and perception versus reality as well, so that we can help try and address this. And we're also relaunching our inclusive employer quality mark. And this is going to help us address inequality and being more progressive employers. And part of this is to gather data and understand the makeup of the industry so we can react to that. But it's also to link in with other trade bodies so that we embed this across the industries. And we're also going to be focusing on more women's events going forwards, and more events around diversity and inclusion. And from today until Friday, the 8th of April, we're opening up an email address here at the RICS, and we really want you to share with us your experiences, your ideas, your suggestions. We want to do focus groups going forwards. We want to do sessions on things like menopause, or, you know, it can be anything. We want to hear from you what you want those sessions on, and we'd be really, really grateful if you could provide your feedback to IWD, International Women's Day, at RICS.org. So easy for you to remember, I hope. So the polling questions. Brilliant.
But I've got them, Emma's passed them through to me, and I think they are giving us some really good indications of focus agendas. So, how do you feel as a woman working in the surveying profession? 66% said, I am somewhat supported, but my business could do more. So I think that's a very strong response to the question on the moves that need to be made. How valued do you feel in performing your role? I sometimes feel valued, 73%. Wow. Again, a lot more to do. And really powerful to get these responses as a temperature on what everyone's feeling. And lastly, how could your company support you more as a woman in the profession? An interesting combination here. We've got the greater recognition, awareness of the challenges women face, 26%, more senior women in leading roles, and equal pay and transparency, which is a very interesting one, which we really haven't touched on particularly, but I think is a very important theme.
Thank you, Ros. So I hope you found this morning interesting. Personally, I have, so I hope that's true of all of us. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our fabulous panels. And I thank you very much for your honesty. I feel like there's been a lot of honesty this morning, and that's much appreciated, and I think the start to all of the change. The words I take away today: allyship, thank you, Ros, support, understanding, honesty, and empowerment. I really hope that this morning has helped you feel more empowered to be a woman in surveying, and I hope that you go away and share the good things about surveying and share with us the bad things and the things that you want us to do so that we can help champion the change that we need in the industry. And with that, thank you very much. For those of you that are here, please do join us for lunch.